last night, and Honorable Minister of Steel Government of India, Shri Chaudhary Birender Singh, will be joining us here shortly in about 10-15 minutes. So I request you all to please take your seats. If you're outside, please join us here in the hall, and please keep your phones on silent mode. Thank you for your patience. Still outside, I again request you all to please join us here. And also please keep your phones on silent mode. Well, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Honorable Minister of Steel Government of India, Shri Chaudhary Birender Singh. Sir, thank you so much for being here with us. It is an honor to have you here at International Ferro Alloys Conference 2018. Now I would like to welcome our Honorable Minister on stage. So please come up on stage. And also Mr. Eloise Durambre, IMNI, Mr. Vincent Constant, ICDA, Mr. Manish Sarda, Chairman of IFAPA, and Mr. Durga Prasad, Vice Chairman IFAPA. Let's give them all a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Well, our minister needs no introduction, but for the benefit of all our foreign delegates, let me give you a short introduction. Chaudhary Birender Singh is the Union Minister of Steel since July 2016. Prior to this, he was Union Minister of Rural Development, Panchayat Raj, and Drinking Water and Sanitation since November 2014. Shri Birender Singh has given a new direction and vision to the Indian steel sector after assuming charge as the minister. Draft of National Steel Policy 2017 has been put in public domain outlining the roadmap for the steel sector. Under his leadership, India's export of steel has doubled and the country has become a net exporter of steel after a gap of 3 years. He has been spearheading the nationwide drive to enhance steel consumption in India using the innovative and out-of-the-box thinking. Industry veterans and top professionals have acknowledged the vibrancy and dynamism that Shri Singh has imparted on the steel industry in India in a short time span. We would like to welcome our guests and Honorable Minister with a planter. So I request Mr. Manish Sarda to welcome our Honorable Minister with a planter. So please come up on stage. Mr. Mohanty, I request you to welcome Mr. Victor Constant. And I request Mr. Durga Prasad to welcome Mr. Eloise Durambre. Well, ladies and gentlemen, International Ferro Alloys Conference 2018 is all about positivity and new beginnings. And I think there can be no better symbol of positivity and new beginning than lighting a lamp. So I request our Honorable Minister and all our guests to light the lamp and start the conference. Thank you, gentlemen. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I will request Mr. Manish Sarda for the welcome address. Mr. Manish Sarda has been involved in the steel trade and manufacturing since last 5 decades. He is the member of the strategic board of group, where his global networking and business development skills have helped the group to create a niche in the international market and create a strong brand for its product. For the last 20 years, he has been actively involved in the manganese and steel industry and has presented several papers at various international and national seminars on the steel and ferroalloys industry. His main concentration is presently focused on overall development of group's new ferroalloys plant named Sarda Metals and Alloys Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Manish Sarda.
A bit of correction that our group has been in the steel business for the last 50 years, 5 decades. Very warm welcome to our Honorable Shri Birendra Chaudhary Singh Ji and to all the guests on and off the dais. This conference has been organized as an international conference after a long time in India, and I welcome all the delegates from across 20 countries. I'll not take too much of time and try to cut short on the time that we have lost. The production basically of ferroalloys in India and the ferroalloys industry itself can be traced back to 1917 when ISCO steel plant, erstwhile Bengal Iron and Steel Company, began production of manganese alloys. While the mining presence in India dates back to the 1800s with the establishment of Geological Survey of India. The ferroalloys industry actually sprung up as an ancillary industry to cater to the growing needs of the domestic steel industry during the first phase of industrialization in the 1950s and the early 1960s. The Indian Ferroalloys Producers Association was then established in 1961 during the second 5-year plan and has been around for 59 years and is one of the oldest associations in the steel DNA. Bulk and noble ferroalloys also has been growing in India, and Indian Ferroalloys Producers Association primarily is about manganese alloys, chrome alloys, bulk and noble ferroalloys. At present, the Indian Ferroalloys producers have an installed capacity of over 5 million tons of alloys, and we are basically running at 72% capacity utilization. Today, the ferroalloys producers, after meeting the domestic demand, exports around 30 to 40% of their production, earning valuable foreign exchange for the country. The country exported around 1.9 million metric tons of ferroalloys and does a foreign exchange revenue of 10,000 crores for the country. A lion's share of Indian ferrochrome is exported to China, and the Indian manganese alloys are exported to almost 100 countries across the globe. I'm immensely proud to state that India ranks number 1 in silico-manganese exports in the world consecutively for the 3 years in a row. And ferrochrome exports, we are the 3rd largest ferrochrome exporter in the world. The Indian ferroalloys capacity was built in anticipation of the steel production, target being achieved as planned. However, the steel industry has been under consolidation and this has resulted a slow pace of growth in the steel industry today. Because of this, part of the ferroalloy's capacity, despite having a 5 million ton installed production, is hovering at around 3.8 million metric tons. However, the steel production is catching up. The excess ferroalloy capacity built by the domestic industry, as we all know, India this year overtook Japan to become the world's second largest steel producing country. The ferroalloy industry in itself is a capital intensive industry. And added to this, the inflated power tariffs accounting for 40 to 50% of the production costs, 2.5% import duty on manganese ore and chrome ore, and also anti-dumping duty on imports of coke, which is $25, and on top of that we have a 5% duty, making things very difficult for the Indian ferroalloy producers to maintain India's global position in the alloy industry. Reductants required by the ferroalloy industry is also not available within the country at competitive prices, and one has to bear the duties imposed on these reductants. Even after considering these issues, India is still one of the leading nations in ferroalloy industry in the world. Sadly, it would be really difficult to maintain India's position globally going forward because of the competitive prices offered by many nations to their producers in terms of power and reductants, and as well as ore availability has been a major issue in the country. Today, we in India produce our alloys at a power rate of roughly 5 to 6 rupees kilowatt hour, whereas in the world, they are producing at 1.8 to 2.25 rupees kilowatt per hour. The second issue and the most important issue for the country is the raw material security, as there haven't been any recent studies to investigate the possibility of ores like manganese, chrome, and noble alloys raw material. No new mines are set up, and imports of manganese are reaching upwards of 4 million tons in the last 15 months. All the major ferroalloy producers in India today are totally dependent upon imported and high quality raw materials from Australia, South Africa, Gabon, and these countries have been exporting a lot of manganese ore into India. Lastly, the duties imposed. The manganese and chrome ore imports, along with the duty imposed on the imports of coke, has burdened the industry in a big way, and it's a big challenge today for the industry to go forward if the policies are not made for the Make in India campaign for the industry. The fate of the industry is closely tied to the steel sector growth, and the growth of the steel industry will naturally translate into the growth of the ferroalloy industry. India is expected to become one of the leading steel consuming nations in the next decade. Considering this, the ferroalloys consumption will increase domestically as well as internationally in the coming years. India can go a very long way in the ferroalloys industry if the governmental policy framework is structured to give the ferroalloys industry a much needed shot in the arm. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I like to conclude my speech now and would hand over the mic to Vandana.
Thank you, sir. I would now request our Honorable Minister to deliver the speech, but before that, I would request you to release the souvenir, sir. Thank you so much. I now request Honorable Minister, sir, please come up on the dais and share your views with us. Let's give him a big round of applause.
On this occasion of International Ferro Alloys Conference. Sitting on the dais, all the dignitaries of the dais, I am happy to be here with you all for the International Ferro Alloy Conference 2018, being organized by the Indian Ferro Alloy Producers Association in association with International Manganese Institute. The theme of the conference, which is India, the Ferro Alloys Hub, is very topical and relevant. Being the top exporter of silico-manganese, third largest producer of chrome, and net exporter of ferrochrome, India has the potential to be the ferroalloy hub of the world. We are one of the leading producers of manganese and chromium alloys with significant exports to world markets. I have been saying that Indian steel industry must become world number one in terms of quality. The ferroalloy industry can be template for this ambition of ours. Although Indian ferroalloys have very good reputation in the international market in terms of quality, this industry also has high quality manpower and latest technologies. We are very well aware of the importance of ferroalloys as an input in the manufacture of alloy steel and special steels. These provide increased resistance to corrosion, abrasion, and wear and tear. The ferroalloy also improve hardness of steel and its tensile strength at high temperature. India accounts for nearly 10% of the world's ferroalloy production and is among top 10 producers of the world ferroalloys industry in India, has total installed capacity of around 5.15 million tons. But what has been told that now 72% of the capacity is being utilized, and you are planning to have it 3.80. But when we see in our 2017 policy, steel policy, our aim is to create a capacity of 3 million tons and production of about 2.55 million tons, 255 million tons actually. The wide range of policy initiatives taken by the government over the recent period will open significant opportunities. This is what I was explaining, that we would be needing with the same pace and with the same speed the increase of the production of alloy steel from alloy industry, ferro steel alloy industry. I am very happy to note that the fact that the global investors are also well focused now on India. In the line with the national steel policy, with increase in production capacity to 300 million ton by 2030, ferroalloys will gain further strategic importance in India. India is expected to show strong growth in usage of steel in the coming years because of its robust economy, massive infrastructure needs, and expansion of industrial production. India is expected to become one of the leading steel consuming nations in the next decade. As far as consumption is concerned, we may be producing crude steel and we may achieve our target of creating a capacity of 300 million tons and the production about 255 million tons. But now what we call transformation is also should be reflected in the steel market also. And that can be greatly helped by your industry. Because when the consumption is an issue, then the consumer wants something different than the existing one. When we pleaded with a lot of our important ministries for the increase of consumption, ministries, maybe railways, maybe shipping, and also national highways. It was reflected by national highways that in the future we would be needing at least 1,500 bridges to be completed within the shortest possible time. And then we explained them that instead of having concrete bridges, if you go for steel bridges, then naturally the life cycle of these bridges would be almost double the life of a concrete bridge. But at the same time, they were hinting towards this, that what I should say to you is that there should be a very important role of ferroalloy industry. Then the quality improves, then there is an attraction with the consumer, and that is where we want to go for. When we talk of total export of steel, it is hardly 1.7%, something like that. And this is very small part of our total production. And if we go for such a, in next 5-10 years, the production level, which is double, more than double, then naturally our export should also be between 5 to 7%. So this is what our targets are. And our targets can be met only with your help, with the increased capacity of yours, with more innovation on your part. And of course, there are certain metals which you are, or the steel industry as such, to import, totally 100% import. So when we talk of new innovations, when we talk of research, we have taken a very important initiative with the policy of 2017, that SRTM, which is a umbrella body, a apex institution exclusively for research and development and also innovations. This has been, you know, I am not from the field of science or something like that. I am having a rural background, a farmer's background. But sometimes I feel that the country is lacking, and that is the only, you know, bottleneck in our speedy progress, that innovations and research elements are missing to a great extent. And that's why we came up with this, that let there be a apex body for research and development. And what I feel is, because now we have already, in the process of constituting the executive body of that, and I would like that Ferro allied industry should also be representing in that SRTM body of ours, because it's not the government sponsors something, it's all the participants of steel ministry, all the participants of PSUs of steel ministry, and also integrated steel plant, secondary steel industry. And this is what I think, that there may be other industries which are very closely or remotely connected with the steel. So you can, when you represent your association, you can be of great help to our efforts to see that the innovation part should also be visibly reflected in our progress, in our future progress of our country. In this scenario, the consumption of ferroalloy will increase domestically and internationally in the coming years. Considering ferroalloy as a power-intensive industry, captive power generation in the ferroalloys plants should be steadily increased. When I was coming from my place, from Delhi, I was told that about 40 to 50% of the cost is only of power, and that is one of the major, input. And as you have already explained, if you want to be competitive world over, then naturally this is one component where some policy decision is required. I give one example of my industry. We have a stainless steel plant at Salem, and the Salem steel plant went for disinvestment, strategic disinvestment. And when I took over as steel minister, I wanted to know what are the reasons why you have gone for this. The simple reply was that for the last 10 years, they are incurring the losses up to the tune of 200 crore every year. So we have no way out. We will have to go for static disinvestment. Then when I went deep into the things, then I came to know that out of 200 crore loss every year, 87 crore loss is because of the high rate of power. So you cannot be competitive. There are two very important factors which are of great concern of you also. The power, and other is our rate of interest in the system which we are having now. So I hope the industry must think in terms of setting up larger units to achieve adequate economies of scale. There are certain challenges related to the ferroalloys industry. Ferroalloy industry spends 40 to 70% production cost. This is what I have already said. And ferroalloys industry has not been operating to its full capacity in our country. Also, some ferroalloy like ferro-nickel need to be imported as they are not available domestically in sufficient quantities. I am open to more ideas and suggestions on how the ministry can help through strategic interventions. I am confident that the deliberations and experience sharing during the conference would result in mutual exchange of information and ideas for the benefit of all the participants. With these words, I wish the International Ferroalloys Conference 2018 all success and thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share some of my views on the Indian steel industry's prospects with the August gathering here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your insight on India's potential and your vision to make it a leading quality ferroalloys industry. And as you said, we are already on top 10. So thank you for being here. And before we move on, I request Mr. Manish Sarda, Chairman of IFAPA, to present a token of appreciation to our Honorable Minister. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Minister of Commerce, Shri Suresh Prabhu, is unable to join us here today, but he has a message for all of us. So I would request you to please take a look at the video.
I am very happy that the Indian Ferroalloys Producers Association has called this very important event, and I would have been very happy to participate into this, but unfortunately I am traveling. But I really congratulate Mr. Manish Sarda and his team for doing this great job. Please assured of my full support. Please tell us the problems you are facing and the challenges you have in the industry. We'll do our utmost possible best to address them and to take your industry to a new level. So all the best to you and congratulations to all of you.
So that was the message, and with this, I think we have set up a strong foundation for International Ferroalloys Conference 2018. Thank you so much. This was the first session. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you, sir. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have a second session straight away. We are not having the tea break. So in case you want tea, you can go out and help yourself. Bring the tea inside, that's okay. But we are having this next session. Yeah. By the time we set up this stage, all of you can go out and grab yourself a coffee and join us here. I request you all to please join us here because we are about to begin the second session, which is on steel scenario. So as soon as all of you are here, we'll begin it. I think our delegates will be joining us here. So we'll start with the second session of the day, which is on steel scenario. And I would like to invite on stage Mr. MC Thomas. He is our session chair. Let's welcome him on stage. Shri N.C. Mathur, Mr. Hill Summers, Mr. Kevian Jafri Teherani, and Shri Somesh Vishwas. For all our delegates who haven't joined us yet, I request you to please join us in the hall. The second session has started. Our session chair will introduce our speakers, but let me introduce our session chair to all of you. Mr. MC Thomas is the executive in charge ferroalloys and minerals for Tata Steel Limited. Internationally experienced business leader with management education and over 25 years of industry experience. He managed Indian and international workforces, equipped with advanced technical knowledge and expertise in overall business planning and operations, including profit and loss accountability. His technical skills include mine planning, mining and plant operations, complex logistics systems and project management, strategic planning, evaluation of new business opportunities, meaningful stakeholder and community engagements. So ladies and gentlemen, I leave the floor to our session chair and our speakers.
A very good morning to everyone, and a special welcome to our international delegates. We are extremely happy to have such a very good response to this conference. Thanks to the entire team who organized it, our executive committee, and all of you. So we had a good introductory speech from the Honorable Minister of Steel, and we would start the session right from there. As you would know, India is in the takeoff point of growth in both carbon steel and stainless steel. So today he mentioned about growing carbon steel to about 300 million tons, and we know that stainless steel we are the number 2 with about 3 million ton only now. We could easily go to 6 million tons. Now all this growth is only possible with equivalent amount of growth and synergy from the stainless steel, from the ferroalloy producers, and all of us are here to share that growth story with the steel producers. This session is dedicated to the steel side of the story. We will hear from experts from, we have carbon steel, stainless steel, and also we have business leaders on the panel. Unfortunately, Mr. N.K. Singh had to go back for some urgency, so he will not be presenting today. So without much ado, I would like to request the first speaker and introduce the first speaker first. We have my colleague Mr. Somesh Vishwas from Tata Steel. He handles raw material strategy as chief with about 25 years of experience. He handled different functions starting from steel plant, maintenance and operation, improvement programs, marketing and sales of steel, and currently he is in the raw material strategy with me. He has done a postgraduate diploma in business management. Let me welcome Somesh for this presentation. So I would request everyone to keep about 15 minutes for the presentation, and then we can have a couple of minutes for question answers so that we are not getting into your lunch time at the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Good morning, session chairman, distinguished speakers on the dais, and delegates from India and rest of the world. I'm very happy to present in the IFAC conference about a global India steel perspective to the delegates. I have structured my presentation into 3 parts, basically the past, the present, and the future. So the deliberations all will be on these lines. Most of us will agree that looking at the past gives us key insights which are very crucial for understanding the present and projecting the future. This slide shows the world's crude steel production since 1900 to current times of 2017, wherein it shows that the world production was on 28 million tons for a population of 1.6 billion. It has gone up to 1690, almost 1700 million tons with a population of 7.6 billion. As you are seeing, that the world crude steel production had not witnessed much increase till World War II. World War I, Great Depression, always in World War II, it has been driven steadily, slowly increasing. But post the World War II, the rebuilding of post in World War II, there is a significant jump in crude steel demand and production with an increase of 6.3%. Then around 30 years of choppy growth because of the oil crisis in 1974, when the Arab countries put an embargo on supplies to oil, and the oil prices shot up 7 times. Post that, in the 1979 Iran revolution, that too also impacted oil. I'm saying oil because crude oil has a significant impact on the global growth, and any impact on the global growth leads to impact, or hike in global growth leads to more demand and more production of steel. So whether it is Soviet collapse or the Asian crisis, all these led to very choppy growth of steel demand, more of a stagnant phase. And in 2000, if we remember properly, that Ukraine, the CIS, Ukraine had a devaluation of currency, and they dumped steel at around $180 across worldwide. So there were bad times for the steel industry as such. But then came the emergence of China. Since early 2000, we grew at a fast pace on a larger base, till the global financial crisis hit us in 2008, where there's a blip. After that, again China pulled through within the investment cycle, pushing in infrastructure. The growth was assured till the latest 2013-14. We all knew about the slowdown of the commodity super cycle. And now we are back again to 1690 million tons of steel demand. So this slide actually explores the view of the earlier slide, explores the view of few major countries which are of interest to us. And it shows that China, which used to be hardly 5% of the global production, now has become 50%. India has grown since 1993, because that was a crucial year for others to know that India liberalized its economic policies in 1993, and post that steel producers are allowed to put up steel capacities without any license compared to earlier times. So post 1993, Indian steel production have increased 6 times to current levels of around 105 million tons of production last year. This one of the crucial slide that I want to deliberate is the capacity utilization. This slide shows the world global capacity of crude steel and the utilization. Utilization is very important. It's an important metric for the industry because prices depends on it. If the utilizations are low at levels of 70% or below, or up to 80%, the prices of steel are dependent on the factor cost mainly, the cost of raw material, because any latent capacities comes on stream in the spike of price. There's a spike, any price increase, put in, the capacities come in, and there's pressure on price. So capacity utilization is a key metric that one should follow, and vice versa also. So any drop in prices will remove capacities from stream. This slide goes to the global exports. The global exports of finished steel was around 140 million tons in 1980. It has increased to around 450 million tons by 2017. And if you see, the quantum exports as 40%, which has dropped down to 29 or 30% to current levels. That means there's a drop in global exports across the world, and we all know what are the protectionism measures that have been put in place by different countries so as to restrict this global trade. So India has been a net importer recent times, but last 2 years we have been a net exporter. But this year again we're a net importer, with US putting up protectionism measures of anti-dumping duties and lot of steel being diverted to India. So these measures, the right side actually shows the current movement of imports and exports to different countries. So India are basically exporting around 16 million ton to 9 million ton till last year, but the things have changed this year, post US law change in rules. So this is black line I have inserted in the graph is actually the net exports of China. You see China is exporting, have been exported 98 million ton net exports. If we add the imports of 14, so plus 100 million tons of exports from China, it has dwindled to 61 million ton. And controlling these exports will be good for the rest of the world. If this increases at a lower cheap price, then it's an issue for the world at large. This is the last slide on the past. This basically shows you the, as I said, the capacity utilization being 70-80%. The factor cost of production is very important for price determination. So see, the gray area is the coal cost, which is around 0.8 or 1 times of the requirement, while iron ore is 1.6 times the requirement for any 1 ton of production of steel. And the blue line is the steel prices. This white band is very important. This white band for a marginal player who is buying iron ore and coal, and this spread, the white band, the spread, which determines the price. So it is around $180 to $200 for a Chinese player to operate. And as the Honorable Minister is saying, that for a countries like India, which is the cost of interest, okay, so equity or the debt is maybe 12-15% compared to China being 2-3%. So this cost, everything, the other factors cost of production, the interest cost, everything has to be accommodated in this wide spread. So this spread going up and down, being pushed by the iron ore and the coal cost determines the price. So steel players actually look at this spread from the past, in the present and in the future. Coming to the present, as I've already said that from regional oversupply in the 2000 with China boom, then the commodity boom, then the commodity crash of the super cycle, now in the phase of the protectionism. And we have seen that the number of anti-dumping not only India, across worldwide, anti-dumping, minimum import price have been imposed. The price of steel, which has gone to $264 on a quarterly basis in 2015 end, which was actually $240 at one point of time, had again crossed up to $587, basically on the push from the raw materials. And another important factor that we actually seeing is that the cyclones in Australia, which is impacting prices. These cyclones, as per the Meteorology Department of Australia, maybe 5-6 times in a year, which impact raw materials. And the crucial mining laws in China. So all these global factors do impact the current scenario. So in a nutshell, we have seen in 2018, there's a revival in capacity utilization. The prices are good at $587 and $600. And China has cut capacity of induction furnace around 130 million tons last year. And this year we have seen around 25 million tons of capacity cut. Capacity cut has been there, but their production remains unabated, above 800 million tons of per annum. So the healthy profits are there. The Chinese players are also making healthy profits. But as I've said already, the fresh wave of protectionism is actually overhanging, which is actually changing the global trade, and the flow of goods is a thing to watch going forward. Coming to the future, this slide on the left side of the chart is actually the GDP per capita versus the steel demand per capita on the y-axis. Is the S curve, the standard curve for any commodity commodity use. As you see, India is quite nascent at $65 kg per capita, while Japan or Germany is quite on the maturing stage. Japan and Germany, although it's a developed economy, the maturity levels, the construction spends have reduced, but they have been able to keep their per capita consumption high through exports. So exports is one of the, exports means exports not of steel, exports of goods of steel, the cars, the cement plants, the power plants. The more you exports out of the country, that adds up to the per capita consumption of steel. So apart from 100 million tons of steel exports out of China, around 70 million tons of steel goods that have been exported out of China. So 70 million tons of steel, if you take into consideration gross yield, maybe 100 million tons of extra another steel production that has gone out of China. So that has helped in the keeping the Chinese steel capacity consumption high, and India, as I said, is the nascent stage and may supposed to go up from 65 levels in very short time. On the right side, we actually show the population growth. The population growth is projected to happen mainly in Africa and Asia. India's population is supposed to reach 1.7 billion by 2050 and maybe the world's largest. However, the rapid aging of the population across the world, that means a population over 60 years, maybe 25% of the total population except Africa, and 70% of this will be, the total population will be middle class, which is a huge market to serve to worldwide. These three are important factors of steel demand and steel production: the mega cities, smart cities across the world, the hunger for infrastructure in the developing economies like India, and mega economic regions I have identified based on the production centers that could export steel goods out of any country. These three will determine the faster per capita utilization of any country. This is one of our view, is that the steel demand is likely to remain unabated, and world will likely to go around 11 billion people population. So the steel demand likely to remain unabated till, and will cross 1880 or maybe in 2000 ASU apparent steel use per million ton in a year. For India, is basically we are around 105 million tons of production. The apparent steel use in terms of carbon and alloy is currently at 91 million tons, the steel demand, out of which 9 million tons is alloy steel. And this may project up to 220 million tons if we grow at an 8% rate, or maybe at 180 million tons if we grow at a 6% rate. This basically depends on the infrastructure and the industrial development that will usher in India in future. With this, I will conclude my presentation. Thank you, and it's a privilege to present to the August gathering.
Thank you so much. I think we'll have the questions together at the end. Is that okay? Or you would like to have questions now? We'll do it at the end. So thank you so much. It was an interesting presentation on the steel, carbon steel side. Next, we have a stainless steel expert, industry veteran, Mr. Nirmal C. Mathur, who is currently the director in JSL, General Stainless Limited. He is graduated from Birla Institute of Technology, Pilani in 1966. And he initially had about 17-year stint with the Birla Group, where he looked after projects of aluminum, cement, pulp, paper, and also got involved in special steel. Post that, he has about 34 years of association with stainless steel with the Jindal Group. He serves as a director on the board of Jindal since long. He also worked as a president of Indian Stainless Steel Development Association for about 20 years, chairman of Steel Furnace Association of India, and he was also member of International Stainless Steel Forum, Market Development and Economic Committee. He also received an award of Udyog Ratna from the All India Stainless Steel Association in Mumbai. May I request Mr. Mathur to please take us through the stainless steel story. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and friends, it's indeed a great privilege and honor for me to stand before you and talk of a value-added engineering material like stainless steel. And stainless steel and ferroalloy go hand in hand. Therefore, I appreciate the organizers for inviting somebody from stainless steel industry. So let me quickly go through some of the data. I don't want to bore you with that, but still it is important that stainless steel production in million ton, it's a small baby, it's just 2.5 or 2.7% of total steel production worldwide, but it adds to 10% of the revenue because it's a value-added material which requires chromium, nickel, manganese, molybdenum, titanium. Depends, there can be hundreds of varieties of stainless steel. And the growth has been quite good. It's a 48 million ton last year. And like in steel, stainless steel also, China is leading. In fact, if you look at the year 2001, India and China's production was same of stainless steel. But today, when you see the data, the China has more than 53% of the share, and India has also emerged as the second largest producer since last year. So it's not bad, but on our population, on per capita, we are long way to go. So now this is also important to know what is the stainless steel or steel and other metals growth from 1980 to 2017. So this is a 37 years data compiled, so that it's not a cyclic business that in 1 year you may say I had grown by 11%, then you say no, we are down to 3%. Let's look at this scenario, which is 37 years. So stainless steel stands out at 5.39%. Carbon steel is almost 2.35, aluminum. So for an average of all these metals, lead, copper, zinc, which is 2.44%, so stainless steel is done better than other metals in growth. There's no surprise that China, even up to 2005, had a very small share, and now it has got a major, more than half of the world steel production of stainless steel. Now this is important from this conference perspective. The family of stainless steel, it's a tree, I can call it. So on left side are the plain carbon, chromium stainless steels, which are 400 series, and where only, what is stainless steel? Stainless steel means the moment you add minimum 10.5% of chromium in the steel, it acquires a special property. It is like a shield, it's like a bodyguard on the surface of the steel produced with minimum 10.5%. So the chromium oxide film is also amazing that it only needs oxygen from the air to reform. That's why we call it stainless. Even if you scratch a stainless steel of the lowest grade of ferritic grade also, it only needs oxygen to reform that surface which protects it. So that's why, and on the other side we have the steels which has nickel containing, molybdenum and others. And here, if you see one of the particular one which will be of significance for us is this nickel, chrome, moly. We have chrome, nickel, we have other grades. But what is important for Indian perspective is that we have brought manganese for the first time in a large use of stainless steel. India should get the credit for that. I will explain to you. Manganese was not a raw material, main raw material for stainless steel production up to the year 1990. And why and how we took the initiative and succeeded. So this will tell you the grade wise that before 1990 almost 74% was only 300 series, which means nickel, chromium, molybdenum, etc. And the rest was the chrome steel, which is ferritic grades. Now in between this white line is something new which has happened with the Indian initiative. Of course, initially it was done during the World War II in America when there was an embargo on use of nickel. So a company like Allegheny, which is so strong in R&D, developed these grades in those days, and they came into ASTM standard in 1950s, like 201, 202 grade, but they remained dominant there. It did not have growth. They used to call it utility grade. But let's look at some of our key raw material now, and I'll tell you a little story about that part when we come to chrome manganese steel, because we have people sitting here from the manganese industry and how this has transformed. Quickly going through our requirement of raw material, no chromium, no stainless steel. Without chromium, no grade can be made. So therefore, that is our key raw material. And this is a global scenario. You know better than me who is who, South Africa, Zimbabwe. These are the people who have that kind of resources. And this also is a plotted data from 1950 to 2017 that totally 833 million ton was produced, and you can see where South Africa, Kazakhstan, India is at 75 million ton production of chrome in these many years, 67, whatever, this 1950 to this means 67 years. Next, of course, this is as important for us to know about the nickel part, which is the most expensive part of our input, and I don't want to go into details of this data. You can see later on from the presentation. And then coming to molybdenum, again, it's a data. I don't think you have more access than me to get data from all this. I don't want to waste my time and your time on this. Now let's look at Indian stainless steel industry and the end-use applications. Before that, let's see, because our present government, the Prime Minister and the Finance Ministry and the RBI took certain steps, what we call demonetization, which happened 8th November 2016. Then we had introduced GST on 1st July 2017. What kind of impact it had on our GDP? As you can see, the starting with the base of 5%, the curve is a very popular one. And again, there is a recovery. In the first quarter already is reported we are back to 7% plus growth, so which is a healthy sign. So it had impact, the demonetization as well as GST, but we are back on track, it looks like, and let's hope for the best in coming months. This is the stainless steel apparent use in the country, which has been steadily growing. But seeing our population, a 2.9 million ton use of stainless steel, we are not very happy. We can definitely have big scope, because if you compare to the world average, which is above 6 kilogram per person, we are at 2.2. And there are all the developed economies have 10, 15, and up to 20 kgs per person also. So that may be what is important. Now coming to this, what do we produce? What grades do we produce in India? I showed you that graph where we had 300 series, which went down from 74% to 54% because of these manganese grades coming in now. And world 20% of stainless steel produced is chrome manganese stainless steel, which means around 9 million ton. Out of 45 million, if you take 20%, it's 9 million ton we are producing worldwide on average, but in India, it is 53%. Because still, it's our housewife who was our largest customer. And what is housewife's tool when they go and buy a utensil in Chennai or in Gujarat or in any other place? They go to buy a utensil, they want to see chumbak lagta hai, a magnet. Magnet means ye to kuch loha hai, it's not great stainless steel, it's not a good grade. So that is the challenge we had in 1989, when nickel prices, which averaged at 6,000 at that time, went to 18,000. Import duty 55%. No forex with the government. We had Mr. Chandrasekhar as our Prime Minister. We had to pledge gold to survive. We could not open letter of credit to buy nickel without RBI approval. So as a stainless steel industry, at that point of time, in 1989-90, 90% was only kitchen and kitchen related use. So those 304 grade is wonderful, no doubt about it, but is that the grade we need, or can we go for an alternative? So we looked at the history, we looked at that development in the United States and in a post-war era in Korea, and we found that, yes, nickel can be reduced from 8% to 4.5% to 2.5%, take manganese 7%, 9%, 10%, develop those grades. We had hiccups, we had problems, we had bad press, that some wrong material is being produced by Jindal or anybody else in the country, but it was a grade which finally settled down. For 10 years, friends, from 1990 to the year 2000, we enjoyed almost monopoly in the world market to produce these grades, where we started with reducing nickel from 8 to 4.5 to 2.5 to 1%, now even below 1%, as on today, as I stand before you. So it's innovation, like our minister told in the morning, that we have to innovate, we have to do R&D, we have to find a solution. Right material for right grade, for right fabrication is the answer for use of steel or stainless steel. So these are some of those manganese grades, and when housewife had this issue of magnet, chumbak लगता है तो अच्छा नहीं है वो steel. Therefore, we had to look at austenitic grade. 304 is wonderful, non-magnetic. 430, it is a food approved grade all over the world. You can cook in 430 utensils, but we could not introduce 430 in the country at that point of time. So we had to look at this, and we developed these grades. We got into the BIS standard, we had all the hard work, and then China took over whatever R&D we had done from the year 2000 onwards, and today 20% of the world is of 200 series of chrome manganese, where nickel has been reduced to as low as 1% or even below 1%. Now coming to the end use, ultimately as a producer we are concerned with where steel is going, where is the end use, and where we have to focus ourselves for future growth. In case of stainless steel, this is a visual which will tell you worldwide where it is used on an average, what is the scenario in India. Even today, 51% or more than half, salute to housewives, right from cooking utensil to serving to washing, you name it, storage dabbas, the stainless steel is preferred material in our kitchen. We are very grateful, and it's the right material, it will last. And at the end of life, it is always recycled. There's no problem. you would be surprised that almost certain companies are using more than 50% scrap, reverse scrap, for making another stainless steel, fresh stainless steel in their mills. Many of you have been to Burj Khalifa in Dubai and have gone up to the top floor and seen a view. It's beautifully clad with stainless steel. All the stainless steel used were all produced from the recycled material. There's nothing like fresh stainless steel or new stainless steel. So therefore, and the other areas, what we call the ARTs, the automotive, railways and transport. That's where we have had a major success in the last 10 years. It was hardly used, and today it's a fairly big amount. If we say in the ART, we are using around 10% of the total use of stainless steel in the country, which used to be 2 to 3% just 10 years back. So that's a very big growth area, and I'll show you by example where it's going. ABC is an area which is still slowly, it's architecture, building and construction. We have to have good fabrication, we have to have good finish, we have to educate the architects, we have to go to the engineering colleges, we have to go to IITs, we have to go to students' communities where stainless steel is not even in the curriculum. So how will they specify? So we have a long journey, but it is happening. So others are, of course, industrial application, etc. Success stories, I want to focus more on the automotive, railways and transport. Indian Railways have switched to the stainless steel passenger coaches. The first one was the Kapurthala plant in Punjab. Then, of course, an exclusive plant in Raebareli has been set up recently in the last few years, which is designed for using stainless steel for the shell and other things. We have seen some major accidents in railways where we have lost lives, and those were not stainless steel coaches. Because stainless steel is not only corrosion resistance, we forget that stainless steel's property also means what will happen on high temperature, there is a fire. Even at 1000 degrees, stainless steel will retain half of its room temperature properties. So therefore, there is enough time to evacuate. What about impact? We now talk of impact. It's amazing quality of stainless steel that it has a huge impact values. So even in case of crash, it works like a shock absorber. And there are many examples in the world where these kind of coaches had a crash and we didn't lose life. Then, of course, there are so many things are happening within the metro coaches around the country, which is a success story in metro cities. Railway coaches, as you can see some of them, and the targets are here. That 17-18, they produce around 4,325 coaches. And this current year, it is going to go close to 5,000 coaches will be produced with stainless steel. They have other biodigester and smaller applications which you don't even see when you travel in a train. Other accessories are there. Metro coaches, of course, the Delhi Metro is a big success story. Mr. Sridharan, the Metro man, he did wonders. In just 10 years, we had 193 kilometers of network where 2.5 million people, 25 lakh people are traveling by metro in city. In spite of that, look at the kind of traffic jams we have, and we have a long way to go. And this will happen in many, many more cities in our country. Bus body is a new challenge we have taken up. Our association has brought out a case study. All the Italian tourism buses are all made of stainless steel. We have had some accidents here of Volvo buses also in near Bangalore a few years back. There was a fire and a lot of life was lost. So as I already told you that stainless steel's behavior on high temperature, in case of fire, in case of an impact, the lives will be saved. So this is a new chapter we are working on, and I'm sure the bus bodies, at least for the fast-moving traffic in our intercity buses, will use more and more. It's nothing new, it's all over the world, it's happening, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. Fuel tank is another example, but it's no threat to our steel industry. Mind you, there are so many people sitting from the parent steel industry here. We are only 2.5%, 3%, we may go to 4%, 96% will remain with the main steel industry for steel-related applications. This is another example which for the tipper and truck bodies, stainless steel has been, they have been started using it. Water transportation. Water is going to be a major issue in our country. Shortage of potable water, delivery of water, leakages. You'll be surprised the amount of leakage, loss of revenue is between 30 and 40% in even city like Mumbai, Delhi, Nagpur and other places. So how do we solve? So we are working closely with the Ministry of Water and Steel Ministry to make sure that all the distribution and how going forward we can use stainless steel pipe, and Delhi Jal Board is already using a very large number of water tankers for delivery. The old ones which were rusted, because after all, what is it? The truck will remain a truck. It's only the water carrying part of it that the cost goes very marginally. There's no leakage, there's no corrosion, no need to paint. So this is happening. So, and of course we are looking at now, the other factor is in architecture, building and construction. It's a slow start, but you can see at our airports, see at our commercial buildings, look at our metro, the big mall, shopping mall, look at some retail outlets, very innovatively stainless steel use is visible in our country as well. So this is one of the latest building in Mumbai, which I just want to showcase only one here. This is a museum for Indian cinema. It was done by NBCC, and this is a recent project they've used beautifully. There are many, at least 100, 200 buildings we can talk about, but this is very small compared to the scope for stainless steel. So in conclusion, friends, I would like to say that India will remain one of the highest GDP growth among large economies. Stainless steel demand can grow up from 8 to 10% in the coming 2 to 3 years' time. And some of the government programs, smart city infrastructure spending, Make in India are a positive sign. We have a young population. 65% of the population of India is below 35. There is a migration from rural to urban. Their aspirations are great. They want to acquire better product, better services, better homes, better kitchens. So it's a good news. And these two areas which I mentioned, automotive, railways, transport, and building and construction will grow. Low per capita use of 2 kg is a sign of future growth. There's no need to worry about it. With that, I want to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mathur. That was a very enlightening presentation on stainless steel and its potential for growth. As I can definitely see the two presentations, both are saying about the future growth potential, and it cannot happen without the people sitting in this room playing a key role. And India has a very fundamentally strong ferroalloy business with a few issues here and there which we can solve. I'm sure that we are geared up to support the growth of stainless and carbon steel in the country. We move to the third presenter. We have Mr. Kevan Jafri Tehrani. He is the owner and managing director of James Tejrat Company, called JTC, since 2002. He has been exporting minerals, especially the iron ore, to different countries, mainly to China, for over 18 years. And he has got about 30 years of experience of mineral business in the complete steel value chain. He has also delivered more than 120 lectures in international conferences. He is also an inventor and owner of the Iranian mineral brand named PMP. PMP is Persian Mineral Product. Mr. Tehrani has become an international face as a senior analyzer of the international economy, mainly iron ore and steel related raw materials. Let's welcome Mr. Tehrani for his talk.
Good morning, good afternoon, because exactly it's 12 o'clock. I confused whether it's morning or afternoon. The most important thing that I attend on the board of this conference, as maybe more than 150 international conferences worldwide, is to prove that in any circumstances and situations, we are as human, we have to connect together, even somebody else impose any sanction or not. I take this opportunity to appreciate from the organizer of this great conference, IFAC, as well as my friend in the Steel Mint, who invited me to attend to this conference. I have some presentation today about the current situation of Iran for production of steel and what is the plan of Iran at the near future. As well as I will look to the MENA region, the current position of this production of other types of steel, as well as requirement of the upstream products. Sorry, in the MENA region, we look after to the consumption of ferroalloys in Iran, as well as export of ferroalloys from India, as well as I look after to some opportunity to do the trade among Iran and India, how we can may export and how we may import. Actually, everything I explained to you, right now you can see as the 9 topics in my presentation. Sorry, it's not coming back. No. Let me starting from the beginning. First is Iran required capacity in order to achieve 2025 vision. The second is Iran steel value chain balance in 2025 vision. Third is different scenarios of Iran steel export in 2025 vision. 4 is infographic of Iran steel export in 4 months of Persian year corresponding to 21st March up to 22nd of July. Is exactly before imposing US sanction against Iran. As you know, US sanction, the first term imposed on 6th of August, and the second term supposed to impose on 4th of November. The 5th content is about the impact of US sanction on Iran steel production and export. We will see, okay, what is the side effects is happening by imposing such unfair sanctions to Iran. Before I am continuing, I want to add something else. That this sanction caused the Iranian people suffer too much. Maybe something is not fruitful for the countries to keep relationship together, but it's not fair. Iranian people suffer too much for such disputes among of 2 countries. 6, prospect of concentrates demand and plate production in the Middle East. 7 is infographic of Iran ferroalloys demand in 2020, as well as India share in Iranian ferroalloys market. 8 is infographic of India ferroalloys export status to Iran, Turkey, UAE, and Kuwait in MENA region. And the 9th is conclusion. The first slide is Iran required capacity in order to achieve 2025 vision. As you see, in all this chain, we don't have such a big problem or shortage, except in the upstream, which is starting from iron ore. In Vision 2025 or 2025 vision, we need 162 million tons iron ore ROM to consume, to produce other upstream products such as concentrates, sintering, pellet, pig iron, DRI, and the last but not least, crude steel. All this chain, we are relying on our hands and foot to perform strongly, but one of the main problems from now we have faced is on unavailability, the explored iron ore mine. As you should know, Iran has the great reserve of iron ore, but the most of them is unexplored. Due to the so many years sanctions, when I'm speaking sanction, maybe 30 years Iran was under tremendous sanctions. However, only during this comprehensive joint of cooperation, which happened between 5+1 countries, only for 2-3 years we had relief on sanctions. Due to such a sanction, Iran couldn't catch FDI, foreign direct investment, for mining sections. And this is the reason the reserve of Iran for the iron ore, as per proved reserve, is more than 5 million tons, and the probable reserve is more than 2.5 million tons, billion tons, more than 4 billion tons, as well as for more than 2.5 billion tons respectively. But if you see that Iran with such a great reserve may face shortage of iron ore is due to this reason. So number one, I invite all the mainly Indian traders and financiers, even during sanction, if there is any possibility to invest in mining section of Iran to explore and extract iron ore mines, to let's be independent. Otherwise, in 2025 vision, Iran obliged to import iron ore. In the next slide, all this slide, if you see the logo of one company in the bottom right side, is the name of company is FIE Co. or Fula Technic International Engineering Company, who is the company who has authority on behalf of government of Iran, Emitro, prepare such a report about Iran comprehensive plan. So anything I provide to you is 100% correct and true according to the information exchange with this engineering company. In this figure, you can see actually the situation, current situation and future of the active plan, red columns, under construction plans, pink color, total, which is the both active plan and under construction, which is the green column. The demand in 2025 vision, the column color is the purple or blue navy. And the balance or shortage to complete the chain in 2025 vision, the color is light blue. Let's start from the upstream first, which is iron ore in the right side of this figure. You see that, as I explained earlier, 162 million tons supposed to consume in 2025 vision, and by considering 18 million tons current production of Iran for iron ore, according to the report of USGS, United States the Geographic Institute, also confirmed 15 million tons is projects in hands under construction, totally 130, and you see we have shortage of 32 million tons. Sorry, I make it a little speed up because to save the time. About the concentrate, as you see that the current project is 52 million tons, 22 million tons project in hands under construction, totally 74. The demand is 80, and we have shortage of 6 million. For 6 million ton, importing is not a big issue. But for importing of 32 million tons iron ore is a big issue. For pellet and sintering, only we have a shortage of 1 million tons. For the DRI, pig iron, only shortage of 8 million tons. We achieve the goal to produce up to 55 million tons crude steel. In this slide, you can see different scenarios of Iran steel export in 2025 vision. It is before August 2018 and before imposing sanctions. Because you know that somebody in Iran said that, okay, we have to produce 55 million tons and then export 20 million tons. Always I told them it's impossible when India has such a big plan to achieve the goal to produce 300 million tons in vision 2030 or 2031. However, I am the person in charge to give consultant to prepare such a slide. Let's study from the right to the left. 20 million tons in the right column is the vision which I have dubbed to achieve. The second column right is 10.5 million tons export, maximum export potentially according to the current export of Iran before sanctions. So by considering the current position of Iran exporting steel, we may achieve to go export 10.5 million tons. 11.2 is based on export ratio to global production, and the last but not least is based on export ratio to Iran production, 15.6. Don't ask me, I rely to which of these export except the based on 2025, but generally I believe some average between 11.2 to 15.6 is probably is achievable, subject sanction is not there. This is the report. Thank you for Stillman prepare such a report. Is according to information provided by Imidro, Iranian Mines and Mining Industries Development and I cannot read it from here. Leave it. Organization, yeah. Imidro is the government sector who prepared such a report. We made this infographic to make simple and clear that before imposing sanction, because sanction imposed from the mid of the 5th Iranian months. Right now we are in the beginning of 6 Iranian months. So these 4 months, as I explained, is corresponding 21st of March up to 22nd of July, prove that totally 2.6 million tons steel exported. Highest exporter is the Khuzestan Steel Company, 959,000 tons, then Mubarak Steel, 459, then come to Hormozgan, ESCO S1 Steel Company, Isfahan, South Kaveh, as well as to Khorasan Steel, Iran Alloy Steel, and Oxin Steel, so 2.6 million tons. Is current situation before sanctions. Okay, let's see impact of US sanctions on Iran steel production and export. New sanctions have already affected on Iran steel export. However, Iranian steel mills traders chasing away new markets by supplying competitive prices. Iran to complete under construction steel value chain projects need to shift again from European technologies which absorbed during Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, to Chinese technology to overcome from sanctions. The main bottleneck is increasing the freight rate for bulk vessels from to Iranian ports, as well as availability of containers for export. The second term of sanctions, which to be imposed on 4th November 2018, will become this issue more complicated. In this slide, you can see in page 9, prospect of concentrates demand and plate production in the Middle East. As you know, in the Middle East, we have one of the first producer or pelletization plant in Bahrain, formerly named as GIIC, established in 1987, and then from the 2000 beginning, the name changed to Bahrain Steel. This company has the biggest production in the Middle East by 2 plants. The first is 5 to 6 million tons, and the second is 6 to 7 million tons. In average, annually, they produce 11 million tons. Bahrain generally, when the name formerly was the GIIC, was importing the iron ore from CVRD of Brazil, but later on, from the time that 100% share of the Bahrain steel belongs to the government of Bahrain, just importing from Brazil, from Anglo-American, as well as Brazil CSN, from partly Chile, and a small quantity from Sweden and Norway. The second biggest producer of plate in the Middle East is Oman. As you know, Vale is there. Vale, as the biggest exporter of iron ore in the world, and from Brazil, established such a pelletization plant with the total capacity of 9.2 million tons a few years back. Due to the long distance from Brazil to the Middle East, Vale tried to actually get advantage by using their Vale Maxes. As you know, Valemaxes is the big construction vessels. I'm saying construction means, structure vessels with the length of 3 times bigger than the football ground, and the width of that is the same width of the football ground, with the capacity varying between 380,000 up to 420,000 tons as per the model of production. The first production of the first build of the Valemax is 2012, and the latest model is 2018. The total fleet of this up to now is 38 numbers and supposed to increase to 100. The value of each Valemax is 110 million US dollars. So by using such a big structure vessels, which is the biggest in the world, they can reduce the freight rate from Brazil to Oman from $21 to below $8 or $7 almost. As you know, Oman had not such a facility to discharge such a big vessel, so in the Sohar port, which is exactly opposite to the city of Minab of Iran, with 218 nautical miles far from Bandar Abbas, erected one of the biggest facility to discharge such a big vessel, and so they are enjoying to high quality concentrate importing from Brazil. So this Oman facility is joint investment of Vale and the government of Oman. The third, actually, the biggest producer is in Iran in 2017. Just let me complete about Oman. Oman 2017 produced 9 million tons. Exact figure is 9.2, and in 2020 supposed to make it double. So they are planning to increase the facility in Sohar port as well. Just one thing I forgot to inform that the long life of Valemax vessel is 20 years. So all this investment has been happened for the period of 20 years, and after that, these big vessels have to go for the scrap, to be a scrap. In Iran 2017, total production was 48 million tons, and in 2025, according to Iran Comprehensive Plan, 75 million tons. The blue column is about the concentrate. Iran in 2017 produced 50 million. As you know, Bahrain and Oman has no production of concentrate. They are importing. In 2025, Iran is supposed to produce 80 million tons. And according to the Iran steel chain value, we have the shortage of 6 million tons, as you see. The total demand of the concentrate in the region, as you see, in 2020 is 40 million tons. And even I believe that is 2020, Iran have to import actually this concentrate. Beside the Persian Gulf, in the Bandar Abbas, one big pelletization plant is under construction, which I am the senior advisor of these projects. The name is Madkush Projects, 2.5 million tons production of the DR pellet, and start production within March 2018, which is already included to the figure of the Iran production. In this, thank you from Steel Mint for preparing such a remarkable and valuable infographic about the current situation of Iran steel production and consumption of the ferroalloys. As you know, Iran crude steel production at the moment is 22 million tons, and ferroalloy demand is 270,000 tons, which 65,000 tons among of that is supplying from domestic market, and India has the big share of the 2/3 almost, or let's say 60% of 162,000 tons supplying ferroalloys to Iran. The rest of the world is supplying 43,000 tons. Future projected 2020, Iran trying to achieve the crude steel production of 30 to 35 million tons, and ferroalloys demand that in 2020 would be 437,000 tons, and India can increase its share to double and enjoy, mainly due to the sanction, also is a good opportunity for India to increase export to Iran to 332,000 thousand tons. In the other ferro infography, thank you to Stillman prepared it for me, is India ferroalloys export. The total of the India ferro manganese export is 420,000 tons, and for the India ferrosilicon manganese export is 510,000 tons. The biggest export of the ferromanganese export has been happened to UAE. Since 2013 up to June 2018, it reached to 220,000 tons. For Iran has the second term. From 2013 up to June 2018, Iran received 180,000 tons ferroalloy from India. And Kuwait only 2014 and 15, only 20,000 tons imported from India. About the ferrosilicon manganese export, as you see, the biggest share is Turkey, which is in the bottom of this figure of infography, which is 220,000 tons since 2013 up to June 2018. After Turkey, UAE has the share of the 160,000 tons import, and Iran imported India ferrosilicon manganese since 2013 up to June 2018, about 130,000 tons. Conclusion. As per Iranian Steel Comprehensive Plan, Iran plans to increase the crude steel capacity to 55 million tons by 2025 vision. Iran steel value chain analysis proves that the main bottleneck is shortage of production and supply of iron ore by 4 years later, in case no new mining projects such as exploration, extraction, crushing, and beneficiating to be executed, then no more chance left except importing both iron ore fines and concentrate to achieve the goal in 2025 vision. Performing of Iran Steel Comprehensive Plan is desire of all Iranian government and private sectors and is their ideal. Nothing may postpone it, even imposing the new unfair sanctions. During sanctions, we hope India may continue to support Iranian steel industry by supplying ferroalloys, graphite, electrodes, technology and know-how, as well as finance. Also, Iranian aluminum industry look after the kind support of India by supplying alumina during sanction. Up to then, 2020, Iran has extra quantity of iron ore fines, lumps, concentrates, plates, and DRI to export. We hope India may support Iran during sanctions by purchasing the above upstream products. The freight rate between Iran and India is almost half to Iran-China. Both countries have to get advantage for this freight competitiveness. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tehrani, for your detailed update on the steel industry of Iran. We move on to the next presenter, Mr. Hill Summer, founder of Million Link. He is a graduate of law from Gillian University, 1986. He has initially worked as a teacher and also in the private companies. And then he founded Million Link, the first of the Million group of companies. Later on, he founded Million Link China Investments in 1999. He has over 26 years of experience in operating his own multinational trade and logistics business, practicing systematic theory of international trade and law into challenging daily business operations. His working was based on the global cost comparison and value investing disciplines. He is focused on developing the focused on the Chinese market, and now he is focusing on the fastest and the biggest potential market, India. His vehicle of business ties to bring world of business to India. So we welcome Mr. Hill. Please start your presentation.
Good afternoon. I'm a big fan of India, but I was asked to talk about China. I'm a big fan of Indian curry, but was asked to talk about China steel. Big job for me. But I got something to say. I know China is the largest steel production country in the world, holds 45% of the whole world productivity. So China is affecting the world. Price all the way rallied from 2016, February 2016 until today. We see rebar price went up from 1600 RMB to 42,000 RMB. So it's all the way up, you can see from the curve. Well, I'm sorry I didn't translate into English, but it is originally from a database. And you can see the ferronickel price was all the way up, and coking coal, metallurgical coke, and the silicon manganese as well. Crazy thing is the electronic graphite electrode. We know where it's like a monster, it went from, it's almost 10 times raised. So what happened in China? What is the driven power of the price and the consumption? It is the consumption. We have seen China's GDP is still growing, but we know it's slowing down. The new construction we have seen, it dropped from 2017 to 2018 all the way down. So I think consumption is not the main power of price rising. So what is it? We see the business last year in China, where if we say in English, it is supply side reform, intermediate furnace, deep productivity, environment protection, mini blast furnace, winter season production limit, natural resources tax, water cooling steel, a lot of things. Above all, deep productivity is the key. Intermediate furnaces, intermediate frequency furnaces has been defined as a backward technology because it was where most of the plant does not have the laboratory to test the material and test the product. Where it is real or not, we don't know, but the government asked to cut it down, to cut it off totally until June 30, 2017. That was the last day. So we saw that all the productivity of IF furnaces has been cut off. Mini blast furnaces has been where we can say it had been removed. Mini blast furnaces, how many it is? It was defined today 400 cubic meters blast furnaces and 30 metric tons are where rotary furnaces are mini blast furnaces in China. So it had been destroyed, not just closed down, it has been destroyed. So it affects some of them where it is affect many things. People thought that it may affect the steel productivity too, but I think not too much. But it is affected rich manganese production from manganese rich ferro, high ferrous manganese ore to rich manganese slag, which is used in silicon manganese production. Solid waste import policy, I think many people may be paying attention to the China import of the solid waste. Yet where there is China to import if you get AQSIQ certificate in export side and import side, but it was hard to get. For example, manganese slag could be imported according to the law, but at last 10 years, we have never seen any license for that. So it's infected import of that material. We know the recycled material is the real material. Winter season production quota. At the winter season, the weather got worse. So there is a policy to reduce the production of every plant, no matter it is qualified or unqualified. This is the quota management. If you have 2 furnaces, you may be allowed to use 1 furnace. So that is the quota management. It is specially managed in 2+6 cities, especially in northern China area. So the consequence is at that time, from September to November, the production will be had been significantly reduced. Environment protection is a big deal. So now China built up a system of an air quality forecast, like weather forecast, and water quality forecast. We can see from the 2 websites, where one of them is the air quality forecast. It describes every cities and every main industry areas air and water quality. If the color becomes yellow, it is warning. And if becomes red, where it must be, many of the plant must be shut down immediately. So if you want to forecast the China market, it's easy. You just log into the website. Actually, it's free, and see the color of the cities. If Inner Mongolia color becomes yellow, most likely the high-carbon ferrochrome price will be rise, because most of the ferroalloys, high-carbon ferrochrome production are there. But most of the stainless steel productivity are located in southern China, Yangtze River and the southern. And the big pressure of last year's, a lot of policies against productivity for the deep productivity, where China still does well at last year's, but differs from many different aspects of the crude steel, pig iron, coal, coke, and the silicon manganese, ferrochrome, and the imports. So where you see from before 2016, almost every steel plants and the ferroalloys got lost. But from 2017, the EBITDA got higher and higher. We see today in Tanshan area, the EBITDA of one dong billet got renminbi 1,124. That is huge comparing to the price 4,090. That is 27.5%. The deep productivity affected the market. It created iron ore output decline, manganese ore output decline, coal output decline, coking coal output decline, metallurgical coke also. And ferroalloys was different. Silicon manganese output declined, but ferrosilicon and ferrochrome output increased. That is very interesting. Pig iron output gained slightly, crude steel output gained slightly, superficial, but decreased in fact. I said so because it is we see the steel plant, steel productivity, steel production, including the pig iron and crude steel and rebar, all had been increased. Why the price jumped up so quickly? I think one reason might be where hidden production that was produced by intermediate frequency furnaces. So if we put that production together, total steel production has been decreased. But how much is it? We don't know because the hidden production was unknown. Unbalanced deep productivity of all products says a lot. On the manganese mining, where it decreased a lot, I don't have the figure, but if we see the import figure of manganese ore at the year 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018 first half, we see dramatically increment from 15 million tons to 7 million tons, 21 million tons, and a half year, 12 million tons. So it increased so much. So I fear, that's just a fear, that in 2017, manganese ore production had been decreased 2.9 million tons. And in 2018, it has been reduced further 1.6 million tons. Metallurgical coke, we see the price was rallied all the way to a very high level. Everybody feared about that. Why it happened and why the price so high? If we put metallurgical coke production and pig iron production in China to compare, we see from 2015 to 2016, 17, and the first half of 2018, the ratio becomes higher. That means 1 ton of pig iron has less metallurgical coke. So that might be the main driving power. Coal shortage, we see from the figure, we see the coal import has been increased so much. Too much at 2018. It was not too much at 2017, too much change 2017, 2016. But at 2018, half year's import is 1.4 billion tons, or 146 million tons, comparing to whole 1 year 2017, 183 million tons. So the import has been increased so much. That's because China environment protection system caused the coal mining decreased so much. The production limit of steel caused a consequence for the iron ore in this way. High-grade iron ore has been used out, but the low-degrade iron ore has not. That is because if you have only one furnace is running, you have to use high-grade iron ore and scrap to increase the productivity. Quantity is many. If we see the stainless steel output and the ferrochrome import, stainless steel output in China at last 2.5 years, and compare the quantity of high carbon ferrochrome production in China and import, you can find the ratio in this way. At 2018, 2017, the figure is much lower than 2016. That may mean that 1 ton of stainless steel has more high carbon ferrochrome. That explains why high carbon ferrochrome price in China last month had been decreased so much. The environment protection and deproductivity has not affected nickel production so much. Even though the price was up, I think that might be the consumption affection. Ferronickel is produced in China by RKEF. Very few of them are produced by mini blast furnace. That is the reason ferronickel production has not been decreased so much. But manganese metal production, we see, have decreased about 2.3% year on year. One main reason is the Tianyuan manganese got production problem. So when it recover, and how it can recover, we don't know. Another thing affecting China market is the technology, is the standard. We see there is a standard about rebar new standard 14999 that affected the market. We see in China, half of the rebars are produced with the air cooling, but mostly where 50% are produced by water cooling. So where you see the right side, the color green is produced by air cooling, but the left side is made by water cooling. That is what they say. Because by water cooling, where even the strong hardness is good enough why it produced, but 6 months later it may be weakened. That is the reason China the new standard has deleted or has increased the matter, especially vanadium and silicon manganese element. We have a calculation about this. We call the water cooling strong water cooling and weak water cooling, which use different quantity of silicon manganese and vanadium or no vanadium. So if all of them has to be has to add more quantity of silicon manganese or vanadium, where the total new demand for silicon manganese based on the 6517 will be about 40 or 450,000 metric tons yearly. And vanadium increment demand will be higher, will be much higher. That explains why vanadium price will jump up so quickly, and even today. And today, if you want to buy more or buy vanadium, you can rarely get it. But you cannot expect the silicon manganese quantity added to the steel production will be taking place just in one day, because this 1499 is a international standard for reference only, not a so you can use it or you cannot use it. But if you don't use it, your product cannot be used in many places, especially railways. So what's next? We have to think about where the deproductivity continue, and environmental protection policy continue. We see this year, 2018-2019, winter production control limit that got stronger than last year. Last year it was asked to limit up to 30%, but this year it asked to limit the production up to 50%. And it has 45 days more. So most likely in this winter, the production of steel and other alloys may decrease. What it may affect the import? We saw the two figures, two charts about China iron import and China iron export, with pig iron import and pig iron export. It was all the way down. But it will continue or it will be reversed. And in the meantime, I think that sponge iron, billet, iron briquette, iron ingot, ferromanganese, silicon manganese, and all other alloys, import may be increased significantly. That is just the imagination. The policy, the deproductivity had been performed last 2.5 years. So what will be the future? According to government statement, 80% of the goal has been realized. So only 20% where still China has to deproduct. So the affection to the market may be less than earlier, than before. We see, I think, diminishing marginal utility of deproductivity may take place. So my present uses the documents below, so I thank them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Summer. That was a very interesting view of the Chinese industry and how things are changing. One thing you didn't tell us is when are the ferrochrome prices going up. So we have a few minutes for a couple of questions if anyone has. We have Mr. Bishwas, Mr. Mathur, Mr. Tehrani and Mr. Summer who's presented papers just now. If anyone has a question, if you could just raise your hand, you will get a mic. Yeah. Thank you. Please go ahead. Yeah. Can we get the
Check, yeah. My question is actually to Mr. Sama. Sir, you told us about the dynamics playing out in the Chinese market. By the way, my name is Nigel D'Souza. I'm from CNBC TV 18. You know, when we talk about the entire steel market and the global market, there's a bit of a dichotomy that plays out. One is because we talk about, a lot of steel production getting shut down in China. And then when we get the production numbers, there is some growth. So going ahead, sir, if you could give us those dynamics, how much is expected to shut down, maybe in 2019? And there would be some capacities that would be ramping up, right? That every time we're getting some kind of growth. So some details on that front, some color.
Thank you for the question. You see, custom or government already declared that 80% of the goal has been realized. That government declares that 80% of the deproduction goal has been realized, so 20% is left. It contains many things, not only the steel, but also the coal and others. So probably 80% cut might be done, but we really don't know from where, because many blast furnaces had been almost removed, so destroyed, and where intermediate frequency furnaces has all gone. So what they can reduce, I think most probably they may raise the standard of mini blast furnace from 400 metric tons to, from 400 cubic meters to 450 cubic meters. So, and of course, some of the lower capacity has not been removed yet. So, yeah, I think 20% this year, maybe 20%, a little bit less.
Thank you. Any other question? Yeah, one here.
My question to Mr. Mathur. I am Patnai from Moil Limited. You mentioned about the increased use of 200 series, sir. Increased use of 200 series using manganese. I want to ask you whether is there any equivalent material for 316 series in 200 series also? 316L, any equivalent material in 200 series?
Well, as you know, stainless steel grades are running into few hundreds, as per the research done by individual companies, as per ASTM standard, as per Japanese specification, as per European EN specifications. So there is no way to replace 316. That's a very high grade, with high nickel, high chrome, and then 316L. Those are for critical industrial application. 200 series initially was approved in India, was basically for the food and food-related kitchen equipments. Now, as we have improved our technology of these 200 series, where nickel can be from less than 1% up to 4.5%. Recently, Bureau of Indian Standards have also approved it for other engineering applications, for making pipes and tubes, for structural applications. So, use of stainless steel is increasing in 200 series all over the world, particularly in India now. And look at 9 million ton out of 45 million ton. It's not a small 20%. And for 9 million ton, at an average of, let's say, 10% manganese, how much manganese we will need? It will come in different forms. It will come in reverse scrap, it will come as ferromanganese, it will come as manganese metal or whatever it is. So, there's no way to replace 316 by any of the 200 series as of now.
One more question. You mentioned about this CAGR of 5.2% for stainless steel and 2.3% for carbon. That is for about 37 years CAGR. But if you see the last year 7 year CAGR, it is about 5.8% for the crude steel. What about stainless steel for the last 7 years CAGR?
Well, the stainless steel, because the China factor has grown in some of the years for more than 7-8%, but the growth in Europe is flat. Let's say the year 2000, 70% of production was in Americas and Europe put together, and 30% was in the whole of Asia, which include Japan, Korea, China, India and Taiwan basically. These are the countries producing stainless steel in Asia. Today it's just the other way around. It is more than 70% is in Asia, the action is in Asia in all these last 15, 16 years. And the growth, because there's no growth in Europe, it was 8 to 9 million ton they were producing, even today they produce the same levels. USA there is a marginal growth, there is a marginal growth in Brazil, but all the action is in Asia and particularly China, followed by India.
Thank you.
Any other question? Yes, one here.
This question to Hill Summer. That crude steel in China has been going down unofficially maybe because of the stoppage of all induction furnaces. That capacity you are showing as 120 million ton by induction furnaces, and production was around 80 million tons. Then what is the alternate route for making up that production? Whether it is by electric arc or by BOF or any other route?
Yes, after the intermediate frequency furnaces moved away, electronic furnaces has been moved in. We saw a big investment about electronic furnaces, and the productivity now is over the supply of iron scrap. And some of the Chinese steel plants are using, putting the scrap into the iron ore to produce steel.
That scrap will be utilized in electric arc furnace then, is it?
The scrap will be used in electric arc furnace.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think one last question, just in the middle. We have enough time to interact with the presenters in the next 2.5 days.
My name is Mohab Hashim from Aiz Steel, Egypt. We are 6.8 million ton steel of long and flat. My question is to Mr. Hill Summer concerning his presentation. You have mentioned that the winter will affect the Chinese production in general, and you listed some of the items which belongs to our conference today. In addition to that, we are witnessing scarcity in the graphite electrodes international market. The supply is very limited nowadays. So my question, will this 45 days decrease in the Chinese production of productivity in general will affect also the graphite electrodes production? The 45 days decrease in production concerning the winter, yes.
Yes, for this, I don't have the figure, but as we know, graphite electrode production cycle takes 6 months. So it's hard to increase the productivity of graphite electrode. As I know, the production, yes, some of the production has been reduced because there was high pollution, but as I know, most of them are still working. So that is the reason of the price hike. It was not a reason the production has been reduced, but the reason of the demand for electronic furnaces.
And the needle coke.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a mini question or remark to Mr. Tehrani. In your presentation, you showed us the map of the Middle East. Egypt, when you drew the map, is from the west straight line between Egypt and Libya, and from the south is a straight line between Egypt and Sudan. It's not curved like this as it is shown. Please respect the sovereignty of your neighboring countries. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Actually, about the presentation which I have provided mostly was about Iran. The beginning was about the MENA region, then changed to the subject of Iran. Just yesterday, I have seen that in the agenda of the conference mentioned again about the MENA region, which it was late for me to insert all the other information, such as the EZZ, which is the biggest producer of steel in the Egypt, as well as in the MENA region. Thank you for your notification, sure. But this notification should be for the, for organizer too, because till the last minute I confused whether I need to speak about Iran only, or about the Middle East, or about the MENA region. But I believe all of us, we are sitting here, forget about our nationalities. As I explained from the beginning of my presentation, we are human, and these conferences, the same as other conferences, is a technical conference, and in technical conferences, nationality is not involved. So I hope that we all join together, try to improve the business in the steel and ferroalloys among our countries, and expand the trades in the region. Thank you for your notification and attention.
Thank you. So I would like everyone to give a big round of applause to the four wonderful presenters. And thank you. I think we have a little extra time for lunch and some networking.
Yes, that is. With this, we conclude this session, but I would once again like to thank our chair, Mr. MC Thomas, our speakers, Mr. Hill Summer, Shri NC Mathur, Mr. Kevian Jafri Tehrani, and Shri Somesh Viswas. Also, we have these as a token of appreciation for all of our speakers. And I would like to request Mr. Sumit Agarwal to come up on stage and present the token of appreciation to Mr. Thomas. Can we have a big round of applause to our chair and all our speakers for having such an informative and wonderful session here? Thank you, gentlemen. With this, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on, and next is the lunch break. So we'll see you at 2:30. So session will start at sharp 2:30. I request you all to please be here before 2:30 so that we can begin the next session. And also, we have a very fun evening planned for you, so we want to keep everything on time. Thank you. See you all. And post-lunch, you can get a bit lazy. The body gets heavier because of digestion, but our delegates are so punctual. I think all of you deserve a big round of applause because I saw a lot of people sitting here before 2:30. So can we have a big round of applause for all of you? It feels great to start on time. Now, ladies and gentlemen, our next session is on manganese alloys and ore. Our chair for the session is Mr. Ashok. I would request you to, sir, please come up on stage. Our speakers for this session is Arshiya Sibia, Mr. Peter Finnenmore, Eloise Durambure, and Mr. T.K. Patnaik. Let's welcome all our eminent speakers and our chair on stage. So our chair for this session will introduce our speakers, but let me introduce the chair to you. Mr. Ashok is an MBA from University of Wisconsin, USA, with 35 years of top management experience in all facets of project management and manufacturing. He oversaw the growth of his company, Nav Bharat Venture Limited, into a diversified conglomerate with business interests in power generation, mining, ferro alloys, and agri-business in India and Africa. So I will now hand over the stage to you.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to this very interesting session on manganese alloys. As she said, you know, our post-lunch sessions are usually given a go-by by many, but I can see from the presence in this hall that everybody is looking forward to the papers that are going to be presented now. Manganese alloys, as it was pointed out in the morning, it's got a very dominant position in India among the other ferroalloys. It was stated that we are producing 1.81 million tons, and India has emerged as the largest producer of silicomanganese in the world, with about 1.1 million tons of this production being exported. So that's quite an achievement, particularly for a country which does not have adequate manganese ore, and bulk of the manganese ore now is being imported. We have with us as speakers today some of the very dominant stakeholders in the manganese alloy industry, and it's going to be very interesting to hear them out. So, without much ado, the first paper we have is Global Dynamics of Demand and Supply of Manganese Ore, being presented by Mr. Lois, Executive Director of the International Manganese Institute, which is the Paris-based organization representing the global manganese industry. Mr. Eloise joined the IMNL in 2014 as Market Research Manager, focusing on analyzing the supply and demand fundamentals of the manganese business. He's a graduate from Montreal Business School, HEC, where he specialized in market intelligence. Prior to joining the IMNL, he was business analyst at the International Chromium Development Association. Mr. Alois is a regular speaker at metal and mineral industry events and other conferences worldwide. I now request Mr. Alois.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here today. I am the first speaker of the afternoon. I know it's not easy to maintain the attention right after lunch, where you want to take a short nap, but I'll try to be as dynamic and interesting as possible. I'm here today to present an overview of the global manganese market. I'm going to speak about alloys and ore, manganese ore and manganese alloys, so that you can base your future business decisions on accurate market information. As Executive Director of the IMNI, I collect information directly from producers of manganese all around the world every month. And with this information, I prepare reports for IMNI members and presentations such as the one you're going to see now. In this presentation, you will see exclusive IMNI figures, including inventory statistics collected from all these major manganese producers around the world. And I will present at the end of my presentation a short-term outlook for the manganese market. So this is the outline of my presentation. I will first focus on steel and specifically speak about China and tell you that China's steel industry is still transforming. The second part of this presentation will be dedicated to manganese alloys, and I will show that production of manganese alloys is rising, especially in China and in Malaysia. And finally, the third part of this presentation will be dedicated to manganese ore, and I will explain that the supply of manganese ore reached a new record high, driven mostly by China. But first, steel. And to start my presentation, I would like to touch on a reporting issue in steel data. Most of you may follow steel production, and for China, there's two major sources you can use. There's CISA, the China Iron and Steel Association. It's an association of producers of steel in China. And CISA figures are published by World Steel. So if you follow World Steel, you use actually CISA figures. We believe that the CISA figures underestimate the production of steel in China because not all Chinese steelmakers are members of CISA. So not all steelmakers in China report their statistics to CISA. And as you can see on the chart here, the CISA and World Steel figures are shown with the red curve. And you can see that there's a very strong rise between 2016 and 2017. But this apparent rise in 2017 masks a reporting issue. It's that China closed last year more than 500 outdated induction furnaces. And most of these small induction furnaces, these small producers were not reporting their stats to CISA. And these induction furnaces that have been closed have been replaced in 2017 and this year by blast furnaces. And these blast furnaces belong to bigger producers, and most of them are members of CISA, so their production is captured in official statistics. So that's why you see an apparent rise in China's steel production between 2016 and 17, and also this year. So according to CISA, the increase last year was 5.4% in China's steel production to almost 850 million metric tons. But there's another source you can use for China's steel production. It's CRU, and we're going to have a presentation by CRU today. And the interesting thing to note is that the CRU figures show a different trend, an opposite trend compared to CISA. They show a decrease of China's steel production by 2.6% last year to 871 million metric tons. We believe that the reality of China's crude steel output is in between CISA and CRU. And the interesting thing is to note that with the elimination of these induction furnaces in 2017, the gap between CISA and CRU figures reduced. So this is what you can see on my chart here. The blue curve and the red curve got closer last year because of these induction furnaces being closed in 2017. And we see falling steel exports from China at the moment. Last year, the fall in China's steel exports was 31% to 76 million metric tons. And in the first 6 months of this year, we've seen a fall of 14% of China's steel exports. The main reasons for this decline in steel exports from China are the reform of overcapacity industries in China, including steel, which improved domestic prices, including for steel in China. And so Chinese mills had less incentive to export. There's also firmer demand for steel in China, and anti-dumping cases, of course, in the rest of the world, reducing the competitiveness of China's steel exports. So for these three reasons, we see a decline in steel exports from China. And this trend is expected to continue in the short term because China keeps fighting overcapacity, as you know, and so we expect more and more furnaces to be closed in China in the steel industry, and so exports to continue declining in the near future. Now, in the rest of the world, we've seen an opposite trend, growing output recently, because steelmakers in the rest of the world benefit from improving domestic demand and lower Chinese steel exports. So China crude steel production in the first half of this year was minus 3% according to CRU, and probably a little bit higher in reality, because again, CRU and CISA show opposite trends. And in the rest of the world, we've seen an increase in steel output in the first half of this year of 3% compared to the first 6 months of 2017. And this is according to World Steel, these 3%. So if we look a bit more in details, in Asia, excluding China, in the rest of Asia, the output increased by 3% in the first 6 months of this year. In North America by 2.4%, CIS 3%, Europe 2%, and India 5.1%. So that's 2.5 million metric tons additional produced in India in the first half of this year compared to last year. So there's a very, very strong dynamic in India at the moment in the steel industry, which is a very good news for the ferroalloys industry. So let's see about this ferroalloy sector, how it's doing at the moment. We see a very strong manganese alloy supply from Asia. The output of manganese alloy reached 10.7 million metric tons in the first 6 months of this year. That's an increase of 22% compared to the first 6 months of last year. We see 38% additional output in China, 27% in the rest of the world. And this is mostly due to restocking by steel mills and higher silicomanganese consumption in steel in China, combined also to the ramp-up of the 3 Malaysian plants, Sarawak, Sakura, and Pertama. These 3 plants in Malaysia have been commissioned over the last couple of years, and they are now ramping up, and this explains partly the growth in manganese alloy output in Asia. Next to my chart here, you can see a table showing the percent change in manganese alloys production in the first half of this year. You can see that Asia and Oceania drive this production increase, followed by the CIS, so that's mostly Ukraine, Russia, Kazakhstan, Georgia as well, and then Europe has a lower growth of 2%. America's almost stable, and Africa and Middle East, we see a small decline in manganese alloys production in the first half of this year. And I've mentioned that one of the reasons for this increased manganese alloys output is the higher silicomanganese consumption in steel in China. And the reason for this is related to the replacement of induction furnaces that I've touched on in the first part of this presentation. These induction furnaces have been replaced by blast furnaces, and these blast furnaces consume more manganese. So that's why you see, even with a stable demand for stable steel production, you see an increased manganese alloys production. And manganese alloys supply continues ramping up in Malaysia at the moment. We've seen a plus 47% increase in the first half of this year to almost 300,000 metric tons of manganese alloys produced in Malaysia by these three new plants. Because manganese alloy demand is rising more slowly than supply, we see that this extra demand of 15% in the first half of this year was not sufficient to absorb the extra supply especially produced in Asia, plus 22%, as I've said in the previous slide. So the supply and demand balance, as you can see on my chart here, remained in surplus this year, in the first half of this year. Whereas in the first half of last year, as you can see on the chart, we've seen an undersupply of manganese alloys. Of course, if we look at inventory, we see a similar trend. Because supply is higher than demand, we see rising inventory for manganese alloys producers. This chart is based on data collected directly from the manganese producers all around the world, including in India. Stocks of manganese alloys outside China increased by 10% in the first half of this year, compared to 12% in the first half of last year. And basically, most smelters cut inventory in 2016, and they restocked in 2017 and again in the first half of this year because of higher supply than demand. Now let's have a look at the manganese ore market, and I'm going to explain that the supply of manganese ore has reached a new record high recently because of China. So traditional suppliers lead manganese ore production growth in 2018. We've seen manganese ore output continuing to expand this year. After booming in 2017, it increased by 23% in 2017, and in the first half of this year, we've seen an additional 9% increase in manganese ore supply to almost 10 million metric tons. I'm talking manganese content here, not gross basis, not wet metric tons, but manganese content. So 10 million tons in the first half of this year. And this is a record high for the first half of the year. And this growing output was driven by traditional suppliers, including Gabon, Ghana, South Africa, of course, India, and Australia. However, we've seen a decline in production from Brazil, as Vale now focuses more on iron ore production. We've seen supported demand in China. There's rising demand from smelters in China, restocking at ports, and lower domestic output also. China produces less manganese ore now due to reducing reserves of manganese ore, safety restrictions as well at mines, and lower EMM supply. EMM means manganese metal, electrolytic manganese metal. So as a result, China is obviously increasingly dependent on imports. And manganese ore imports into China reached a new record high in 2017, and it at 21 million tons, a bit more than 21 million tons, as you can see on the chart here. And it continued rising in the first quarter of this year due to increasing demand from smelters in China and lower domestic supply. In the first quarter of this year, China imported a bit more than 6 million wet metric tons of ore, and that was a new record for a single quarter. That was 3% up 3% from the first quarter of 2017, and plus 15% from the last quarter of 2017. So we really see that China is becoming increasingly dependent on imports from the rest of the world, including, of course, South Africa. South Africa is in green on my chart here, so you can see that its share of the total imports in China is growing significantly, especially in 2017. And since April 2018, China stopped publishing manganese trade statistics officially due to technical reasons, but actually it is because of the trade tensions with the USA. So with the Trump administration, there's a lot of trade tensions now, and China decided to stop publishing manganese ore, manganese trade stats. But we've analyzed the shipments arriving into China, and I can tell you that this trend that I'm showing in this slide is continuing over the last few months. China keeps importing more and more manganese and becoming more and more dependent on imports and traditional suppliers from the rest of the world. We've seen manganese ore restocking this year. Miners' stocks increased by 8% in the first half of this year, so that's the blue part of my chart here for 2018. And this was because of higher production in the rest of the world, so excluding China. And this is according again to the statistics we collect from all the manganese ore miners, all the major miners in the world. And next to it, next to the blue part of my chart, you can see an estimate of China's stocks variation in the first half of this year. And as you can see, we've seen an increase of 58% of China's port stocks. So this is not inventory for Chinese miners, but more for Chinese buyers, because this is stocks sitting at China's ports. So an increase of 58% in the first half of this year. And this is what you can see here more in details in this chart. The blue part of my chart shows the total port stocks in China, and the yellow curve shows the price. So I wanted to show you a correlation between port stock in China and international manganese ore prices. Manganese ore stocks at China's ports continued increasing in August, and they reached 3.13 million metric tons at the beginning of August, due to, of course, growing imports. And what's interesting to see here is that usually, as you can see, if stocks increase, price of manganese decreases. You can see that in the first part of my chart. Then the other way happened between 2017 and the first quarter of 2018. We see increasing prices and decreasing inventory. And again, the contrary after that in the second quarter of this year. But now, in the third quarter of 2018, we see similar trends for inventory in China and manganese ore prices. And this is because the rising inventory in China in Q3 this year is not sufficient to reduce manganese ore prices because of strong demand in China. Now I'd like to give you a quick outlook of the expected extra capacity for manganese ore in the short term. We expect 6.7 million wet metric tons of new manganese ore capacity in this year, between this year, 2019 and 2020, including 2 million tons in Ghana for manganese metal production. So this will not affect manganese alloys production, these 2 millions of extra capacity in Ghana. It's only used by Ningxia Tianyuan, the big Chinese manganese metal producer. But it's important to see that manganese ore capacity continues rising. In South Africa, we've seen Kgalagadi, the new mine, ramping up this year. So rail capacity is getting close to maximum. Last year already, South Africa exported more than 15 million tons of manganese ore. So that's the rail capacity is getting close to maximum in South Africa, which could limit exports in the future, especially considering rising oil prices in different countries, including South Africa, that increases the trucking cost. So my conclusion, just a short-term outlook for manganese ore. I've identified a few factors supporting manganese ore prices in the short term. There is, of course, the declining domestic ore production in China and increasing dependence on imports. Logistics in South Africa, limited rail capacity and rising oil prices, increasing trucking costs. There's also a weak US dollar at the moment that is increasing manganese production costs in different countries, including Australia, Brazil, etc. So these could also impact prices. And on the other hand, there's several factors putting pressure on manganese ore prices. There's growing protectionism in the steel industry. There's a manganese alloy sector moving towards oversupply. rising manganese ore supply expected from some existing mines and new projects, as I've shown in the previous slide, and increasing stocks for manganese ore producers and at China's ports. So these 4 factors could put pressure on manganese ore prices in the short term. Now I'd like to briefly give you a little bit of information about IMNI and what reports we publish for IMNI members. Any company can be a member of IMNI. You don't need to produce manganese ore or manganese alloys. You don't need to be a trader. Anyone interested in manganese can get information from us. We have exclusive statistics in China, collected by a full-time representative in China. I think we have the best data available in China, including production figures by province on a monthly basis. So we know exactly what is produced in each province. You can see here a screenshot of one of our reports. You can see province by province how many smelters are in production, how much they produced by province. And of course, we also follow the port inventory and prices in China. We also have a database of all manganese producers in the world, manganese producers and users, as well as all the future projects. So we have around 700 manganese producers. And this database is available by product, by country, so you can really filter to know who is using manganese ore today, in which countries, and how much they need per year to operate. And of course, we have the contact details also for all of these companies. We've recently published maps of the manganese industry in China, in India, and in the rest of the world, also with the production capacity for each producer. You can see here a screenshot of the eastern part of Inner Mongolia in China, which is a very strong producing region for manganese alloys. Yep, sure. I'm almost done. We have also trade statistics and manganese alloy and ore price forecasts. So to conclude my presentation, I'll just highlight the benefits you can get from joining IMNI. You get access to the best market research available on the market, exclusive events, including technical visits. We've organized some in Malaysia this year. We are going to Ukraine and Georgia next year. You can get credibility and stand out from the crowd of manganese alloy producers and traders in Asia. We provide HSE support to comply with new regulations and also networking opportunities. And the fees to join IMNI have been reduced to 7,000 euros per year for Indian companies. So if you have any questions about the IMNI and this report, you're welcome to send me an email at darambur@manganese.org. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alois, for giving a macro level viewpoint. The point of concern is, of course, the demand-supply mismatch that he's brought out, caused by the increased supplies from Malaysia. But on the positive side, there is better availability of manganese ore projected with rising quantities from various countries. So that should hold the manganese ore price at saner levels. So thank you once again. The next speaker we have is Mr. Tanmaya Kumar Patnaik, who's the Director Commercial of Manganese Ore India Limited. Mr. Patnaik is a postgraduate in both political science and public administration and a gold medalist in the latter. He has to his credit a vast experience of over 3 decades in various capacities in Steel Authority of India Limited. And during his various postings, he worked throughout the length and breadth of the country. He also worked with the Government of India as the Deputy Development Commissioner for Iron and Steel, Deputy Iron and Steel Controller from 88 to 90 in Reverse Foreign Service. He underwent numerous advanced level training programs, including management training programs on instructions in marketing techniques and selling skill at Ashbourne Hill Management College, UK, as well as training on leadership skill organized by the Administrative Staff College of India, including foreign modules at Netherlands, Belgium, France, and Luxembourg. Mr. Patnaik is a recipient of the prestigious Jawahar Award in 1995 for his excellent performance and outstanding contribution to SAIL. Shri Patnaik took over charge on the 2nd February 2015 as Director Commercial MOIL and underwent a Schedule A CPSC under the administrative control of Ministry of Steel. He is widely traveled in India as well as abroad and is associated with several professional organizations. Mr. Patnaik's paper is titled Manganese Ore and Alloys, Domestic Supply and Demand. Mr. Patnaik.
Thank you, Mr. Ashok, Mr. Chairman, gentlemen and ladies. At the outset, I would like to express my sincere thanks to IFAC for giving me this opportunity to be amongst all of you today to discuss on the manganese ore and alloys, domestic supply and demand. It is indeed my privilege to discuss a topic concerning my country immediately after a presentation on the same topic, a global presentation on the same topic by Mr. Alois. Friends, in a world dominated by rich, industrialized countries with steel consumption going in 4 figures, like South Korea going beyond 1,000 kg per capita, we are a rather developing country industrially, with steel consumption at 68 kg per capita, 1/3 of world average, or little less than 1/3 of world average at 210 today. In a world dominated by very large mining companies and miners, mining various minerals, hundreds of millions of tons. Mine is a small but beautiful company, mining 1.2 million tons per year only. And I must say, in a world forum dominated by experienced experts in the field of manganese ore and ferroalloys, I am rather a new entrant to the field. So that's about my country, my company and me. Now, I will be discussing in little detail the scenario of manganese ore and alloys in India, how it is today and what is our prediction for the future. In the first slide, I have just outlined a few usages of manganese ore with specific reference to India. As all of you know, it improves strength, toughness, wear resistance, hardness, workability. You can see all that. I am not going to repeat and take your time on that. Basically, manganese is adding strength to steel. Around 95% of manganese ore is used in steel industry for production of ferroalloys as well as directly in the blast furnace. The rest 5% has non-metallurgical use in dry cell batteries, chemicals, and some other usages, including pharma sector, etc. Indian steel production, which is basically, the production of steel drives the demand of manganese ore and ferroalloys. The Indian steel production, you can see in this chart, between 2007 and 2017, in a decade, it has grown about 90%. And after that also, as I mentioned in the beginning, still our per capita steel consumption is one of the lowest at 68 kg, less than 1/3 of global average. This is import and export of steel. As in the first session, before pre-lunch session, it was elaborately discussed about the import-export scenario of Indian steel industry, where in 2017, India has been a net exporter of steel, with exports outweighing imports very heavily. Against 8.9 million tons of imports, there were 16 million tons of exports. But so far as 2018 is concerned, if you see till today, the imports have again surpassed the exports, but we are hopeful that in the remaining period of the year 2018, again we should become a net exporter of steel. Indian steel sector has been witnessing growth in the past few years, 3rd largest steel producer in the world during 17, and 2nd largest producer during most of the months in 2018. Except May, in almost all months, India produced more steel than Japan. India is the world's largest producer of sponge iron, and the future is increased government thrust on steel-intensive industries such as infrastructure development, construction, automobiles, etc., demonstrate high potential for steel usage in future. Forecast of iron and steel demand and production by 2030-31 is a figure compiled by Joint Plant Committee under the Ministry of Steel. They have given two projections, scenario 1 and scenario 2, and the projection average. This basically gives us an outlook into how we should, the scenario for manganese ore and steel should be behaving up to 2030-31. You know, our national steel policy, as Honorable Minister mentioned in the morning, was published in National Steel Policy 2017 was published by Government of India, Ministry of Steel, which outlines 300 million ton as the capacity in 2030 with at least 255 as the production. Growth of steel production vis-a-vis manganese-based alloys, because as I told you in the beginning, it is the production of steel that drives the requirement of manganese ore and alloys. So from 68.30 in 2010, the steel demand, the steel production has reached 101.40 in 2017, and the manganese-based alloys production from 1.44 has gone to 2.44. You can see that growth in steel production is at a CAGR of 5.8, whereas growth in manganese alloy production shows a CAGR of 7.8. Expected growth in production of steel, we have taken an average of both the scenarios in as calculated by Joint Plant Committee, which comes to 274 million tons in 2030 from 101.4 today. And that translates into a requirement of 3.73 million tons of manganese-based alloys. Whereas, if we calculate today's CAGR of 7.8%, it comes to 6.5, a theoretical figure, but 3.73 is what is required, and for production of this 3.73 on an average, we require 9.32 million ton of manganese ore in the country. Production of manganese-based ferroalloys in India, it is 2.43 today, with ferromanganese and silicomanganese at 1.9 and 0.53 respectively in 2017. It has grown from 1.44 to 2.43, 2.44 as I told you. Export of manganese-based ferroalloys, you can see that almost 50% of ferroalloys, manganese-based, produced in the country are exported. Demand for manganese ore, which is driven mainly by the production of ferroalloys, as per NSP 2017, as I told you, production capacity is expected to reach 300 million tons, and steel consumption to grow to 160 kg from 68 kg. This translates into a projected demand of 11 million tons of manganese ore by 2030. To reach production of about 13, because 2 I have added as the anticipated exports to continue during that time also, manganese production in India is required to grow at the rate of 12% per year if we have to be self-sufficient in India. With this path of progress, country's known reserves, I am coming to the next slide, will show you the reserves and resources we are having, will last for maximum 10 to 12 years. Export of ferroalloys is expected to continue, albeit at reducing levels. This necessitates the remaining resources to get converted into reserves at a higher pace than what is happening today, and continuance of import of high medium grade manganese ore. Demand supply dynamics, if we see, domestic consumption of ferroalloy in India, 17-18, I have gone to a financial year here because it's strictly about India. Domestic consumption of ferroalloy was 1.3 million tons. So the requirement was 3.25 for this, theoretically calculated. Manganese ore required for export is 2.83. Manganese ore production in India was 2.52, and actual imports during 2017 was 3.57. So manganese ore imports for indigenous, the shortfall still is 0.73, and 3.57 minus 0.73, what was exported, arithmetically if we see, was for the purpose of production of ferroalloys for exports. These are the reserves and resources in India, state-wise. The reserves at 81.47, where oil accounts for 31.75, and the remaining resources 402.40, out of which oil accounts for 49.72. Production of manganese ore in India, it is varying at the almost hovering around 2.5, you can see. It hasn't gone up. It's because attractive international manganese ore prices of high grade ore coupled with low ocean freight become very attractive for Indian industries, especially in port locations, because as you know, our ferroalloy industries are in India are mainly concentrated in 3 locations. One is a central place in and around Raipur, and the other 2 being Vizag and West Bengal are port based. So there, basically the imported manganese ore become more attractive. Indigenous manganese ore production has not progressed much in the recent past. This could be a reason for that. However, with 35% reserves and 18% resources only with moil, still moil accounts for 48% of the country's production. Challenges before the manganese ore industry: limited resources of high-grade ore. In some parts of the country, MNFE ratio is a major concern for direct use in production of ferroalloys. In some parts, silica and phosphorus contents are also main concern. This necessitates imports for proper blending and usage. Type of deposits: narrow width of ore body, making it unsuitable for full mechanization. Unfavorable geological conditions in many places. Most of the mines of moil, leading producer of India, are underground, and therefore the cost of production is comparatively higher. Then restriction and deployment of contract labor in underground manganese ore mining, unfavorable tax structure, extensive regulation, volatile prices, and mostly dependent on availability of manganese ore in China ports, as Mr. Alois has shown. These have been the concerns of the industry in India. This is a demand-supply forecast made by Indian Bureau of Mines, which roughly tallies with National Steel Policy, what we discussed also. And they have projected 2029-30 at requirement at 13.72, with indigenous production at 5.69 and import of 8.03. To meet the demand in long term, what strategy is required is delineated here under 5 headings. Manganese ore production will have to be raised to fully meet the domestic demand by enhancing output from the existing mines and by opening additional virgin deposits. The industry can raise supply of manganese ore by acquiring mines overseas as well. India is deficient in high-grade, low-phosphorus manganese ore reserves. This necessitates imports of high-grade ore to blend with domestic quality of manganese ore for production of required manganese alloys. Focused attention is needed to ensure higher rate of recovery of manganese ore and improve the quality of ore by engaging in beneficiation and sintering processes, which are very less compared to the world average today. Geological Survey of India, as well as other nominated agencies as per MMDR 2015, should undertake extensive drilling to identify new ore deposits in higher depths. Deep sea nodules can be a potential source for manganese ore in future. The renewal of mining lease and grant of new leases can be expedited, even if with MMDR 2015 it has become little easier, but still a lot of ease has to come to quickly ramp up the production of manganese ore in the country. Now this is, in a nutshell, in one slide I have put the look of Indian manganese ore industry. It's an attractive industry with low threat of new entrants, medium competitive intensity of competition, and low to medium bargaining power of buyers, and low threat of substitutes. This is about the manganese ore industry in India, of which moil represents about 50%. So a little about moil, the company I work for. It was basically in 1889 as a Central Prospecting Syndicate, Central Provinces Prospective Syndicate to be exact, it was formed. Then in 1908, the syndicate was converted into a public limited company incorporated in United Kingdom. 62, it became a government company. Government took 51% of the stake, leaving 49% with CPMO, which also came to government's hand in 1977. 2010, the company got listed, and 2014, it was elevated as a Schedule A Miniratna company under Government of India. Resources, reserves, and production of manganese ore. I mentioned in a nutshell that even if we account for only 15% of resources, 18% of resources and 35% of reserves, we account for 48% of production of manganese ore in the country. This table gives the details thereof, year-wise. To increase the production, what my company has done in a nutshell is presented here. In order to meet the demand gap, these are the following steps which have already been taken. Deepening of existing vertical shafts, sinking of additional vertical shafts, sinking of large diameter high-speed vertical shafts, large-scale development in open cast mines, underground development, and continuous mechanization. We have also signed a MOU with Government of MP for exploration of minerals, including manganese ore, mainly on manganese ore, in various districts, 4 districts of MP, after MMDR 2015 allowed us to do that job. These are the new area development, what we are trying to do to ramp up the production. This is collaboration with State Government of Madhya Pradesh, as I have told you. That's all I wanted to present. This is a small story of manganese ore and ferroalloys in the country. The little labor that I have put in preparing these slides will be amply rewarded if the honorable dignitaries here come out successful in appreciating the manganese scenario of India in its proper perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patnaik. I mean, I'm sure, just as all manganese alloy producers in India were very interested in knowing what MOIL's plans are and how much are they going to do to support the industry with ore. And your paper has given us a good insight. Thank you. What is worrisome is that the manganese ore supply is really not going to keep up with the alloy production, with the growing alloy production, and India would have to depend on imports of manganese ore in a bigger way in the coming years. I forgot to mention the questions to the panelists. We will have them after all the speakers are finished, so we could have them all together. The next speaker is Mrs. Arshia Sibia, Commodity Analyst, CRU. Arshia is a commodity analyst with British-based MNC CRU. She has been with CRU for almost 3 years, working on cost models, reports, and white papers pertaining to steel-associated raw materials. She has been a regular speaker at FIMI conferences. Currently, she tracks the market for manganese alloys and manganese ore. Alongside this, Arshia is also tracking iron ore and thermal coal markets. Her paper is Pricing Trend Mechanics of Manganese Alloys and Ores. This is Arshia.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon to all the delegates. I think I should first of all start off by saying a big thank you to the IFAPA members and especially Mr. Manish Sarda for giving a young analyst like me this immense opportunity to present amongst the industry veterans. So thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So I'm from CRU. We are a commodity research company, and I'm part of the steel raw materials team, and along with the key commodities like iron ore and coking coal, we're also tracking ferroalloys. And today I'll be discussing our research on ferroalloys, basically discussing the recent trends, what has caused them, and what kind of forecasts we're projecting for the next few months and in the medium term. And so, yes, I'll start off with the recent developments, followed by short-term outlook, medium-term outlook, and in the end, a little something about how the Malaysian supply is affecting the pricing in the manganese alloy market. So to begin with, Chinese silicomanganese prices, as we can see, started on a very high note in the beginning of the year. and then gradually dipped towards the summer months, and then again they have picked up, and they've been on a pretty high level since. And excuse me, this trend is actually reminiscent in the futures market. As you can see on the graph on the right, the futures market trend has been similar to the trend in the spot market. And this can be traced to some developments that have taken place in the Chinese market. So to begin with, in June, a lot of environmental teams had arrived in several provinces in China to check whether the producer are meeting the environmental standards. And during this time, typically, a lot of producers curtail their production or temporarily close their furnaces. And that's when we can expect production to be limited. And that's why the sentiment that prices will increase on account of supply tightness comes on board. Following this, we see that there was a slight dip after around July. And this is because, again, there were rumors that these environmental teams are leaving. And sure enough, they did leave around mid-July, but prices have still been high, and that's been because of some sort of market tightness that has been expected for September delivery. In terms of profit margins, manganese, so if we first look at manganese ore, the key cost component, it was also very high in the beginning of the year and then plunged towards May, June, and that it has also increased, although silicomanganese prices have increased to a larger extent than manganese ore prices. Therefore, profit margins in the beginning of the year for Chinese silicomanganese producers were high, and then they dipped, and again, now that the prices are so high, we are again seeing the positive margins for the Chinese smelters. In terms of port stocks, this is a very interesting trend. We see that the port stocks have been increasing almost continuously since March, and they've crossed the 3 million ton level. And and even though production levels have been decent after the environmental teams left in July, and as you can see from the graph on the left, not only have production levels been high because environmental teams left, but also because margins were so encouraging that production levels rose. But in terms of the margins for the rest of the producers in other regions, as you can see by these graphs, smelters in Europe and India have not had as high margins as China, and it's actually been a decreasing trend for them after end of 2017. So most of the year, most of H1 has been mostly weak for the smelters. So can we expect this trend to continue? In terms of ferroalloy prices, right now the silicomanganese Chinese prices are very high, and we expect them to come down. And one of the main reasons for it is the heating season. Heating season is expected to commence around October, and that's when there'll be reduced demand for the ferroalloy sector. And already we're seeing that there is ample supply, as has been discussed in previous presentations, that in H1 the supply was decent. So during a period of low demand along with decent supply, we can expect prices to come down. As you can see in the graph on the left, there's a slight uptick towards the end of the year. That's because we are assuming that there'll be another round of environmental checks, similar to what happened last year. And during this time, as I explained earlier, this is when there'll be a slight supply tightness in the market, which will support prices. And that is also the time when we can expect margins of the smelters to lift up again, as shown on the graph in the right. For the rest of the world, again, it's a bearish trend. Prices will start to fall. Already, as has been discussed, that demand hasn't really picked up with supply. And towards the end of 2017, margins were good, and supply response has been pretty good. And stocks have also been increasing. And because of that, there is ample supply. And during a period where demand hasn't picked up, this is bound to put pressure on the prices. And we should expect prices to lower in the coming months. And similarly for US, as you can see, the prices are on the high level, and of course, after the tariffs were imposed, there was the capacity utilization of the domestic American steel mills increased, and because of that, ferroalloy demand increased, and prices have been quite high, but we don't expect these prices to remain at such a high level because these premiums are bound to attract imports and normalize supply and normalize prices eventually. In terms of manganese ore, excuse me, as has already been discussed, supply has been strong, and after the 2016 cuts, supply is gradually coming back. A lot is being driven by South Africa. Chinese manganese ore production, we expect, is also slightly on the higher side because of because of the incentivizing prices that are there in the domestic industry. But going forward, we expect these production levels to be lower because the Chinese domestic production reserves are of a lower grade, and also they are not very cost effective. If memory serves me right, the costs of these miners are somewhere close to $8. So they're not very viable, and they will decrease, which means that there will be scope for more imports into China. And in terms of overall demand and supply in the market, as you can tell from the graph on the left, and again, as has been discussed earlier, there seems to be an oversupply for ore. So this again should put a downward pressure on prices. On the right-hand side, we've shown our forecast. We expect prices to come down because of lower demand from China, especially at a time when port stocks levels are so high. So prices are expected to touch $5, which I know right now seems like far-fetched because the prices are so high. But this is roughly the price expectation for Q4 once heating season starts. Medium term, so in the next couple of years, what kind of price expectations are there? So the manganese ore consumption will continue to grow outside China, though not at as high levels as was historically seen, but it will still be around 2 to 3%. And as the graph on the right shows that after China, a lot of imports would be driven by India. India is a strongly growing economy, and I think the steel production would be led by India. Around this year, I think year on year, the growth is expected to be around 8%, and in the coming years, it's expected to be around 4%, as against 2 to 3% for the rest of the world. So even though domestic supply is going to increase, it won't be able to match up with the demand, and therefore we can expect more imports in the future. In terms of supply from other regions, it will continue to grow, as has been discussed. A lot of ramping up is taking place in South Africa, and new projects like Kalagadi are also coming up. So supply will keep growing with rising demand. So what it means in terms of prices, as supply will keep growing, we can expect prices to lie around the 85th percentile of the cost curve, which means that 44% would be close to $5. And as has been mentioned earlier, that South African rail capacity is almost fully utilized. That means that any additional tons would have to be trucked, which would be more expensive. But trucked South African tons are still less than $5. So that would mean that we can expect prices to not be above $5 if fundamentals hold. In terms of prices in other regions, in Europe, prices are expected to bottom out towards 2019 and then again lift because of higher capacity utilization. So in the coming years, from both US, Europe, we can expect better capacity utilization of to the north of to around 80 to 84%, which will help lift the prices. Now lastly, around Malaysian supply, this has been an interesting topic, especially for the Asian markets, because Malaysia is a growing supplier and is a significant exporter to the JKT areas. So as you can tell from the graph on the left, within like the Malaysian plant started production in late 2016, and within a short span of time, they have occupied a very significant rank in the exporting silicomanganese export market. And as the graph on the right shows, that capacity utilization levels are increasing. They're currently at a very high level, but they're still not at capacity. But we're expecting that in the next 3-4 years, they will be operating at full capacity utilization. So what does it mean in terms of prices? I think currently in the short term, there's already a lot of, there's ample supply because of strong supply response, because of good margins in the previous quarters. But, and on top of that, Malaysian supply is also coming on board. The main advantage, as we all know, of Malaysian supply is power cost. As was discussed in the morning, power cost is roughly 20 to 30% of the production cost. And Malaysia stands a great advantage in this term. So the graph on the left is basically showing a comparison of the country's average power tariff against the industry average. So as you can tell, Malaysia is on an average of $15 less than the industry average. And India, in contrast, is almost $20 greater than the industry average. So, and not just that, India also is importing a lot of manganese ore and is also dependent on imported coal. So overall, this makes India a high-cost producer, and we think India is can be considered as a marginal producer, which means that prices are going to be, in the long term, prices are likely to be aligned to the prices being offered by the Indian producers and won't be undercut by the Malaysian supply. Another way to elaborate that India is the marginal producer is by looking at the graph on the right. This is basically a comparison of silicomanganese export prices against exchange rates. So as you can tell, when exchange rates, excuse me, when the rupee depreciates, the prices also come down, and vice versa. And it's a decent correlation, as you can see, which basically shows that to maintain their competitiveness, whenever there's scope to reduce the prices, Indian producers tend to do that. And this is during a period of stable manganese ore prices. So when exchange rate depreciates, then there is scope to cut prices, and that is what we've seen. So overall, low-cost Malaysian supply won't drive prices in the long term, and it is the marginal producers like India who will really be, according to whom the prices will be aligned. With that, I would like to conclude the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Arshia. Thank you for your analysis. And something a lot of the alloy producers here will find encouraging is your projection on manganese ore prices coming to sub $5 levels. And Mr. Patnaik has to go away somewhere, so he has requested that any questions which are meant for him be asked now so that he can excuse himself. So if anybody has any questions for Mr. Patnaik, who presented the paper on MOIL, from MOIL, he is here to answer you. Well, if there are none, we can. Thank you, Mr. Patnaik.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that I had to.
Sorry, I think there is somebody who wants to say ask something.
Sir, I'm Vivek from Navbharat Ventures. I want to ask what MOIL is doing. Is MOIL doing anything to beneficiate the low-grade ores? Since most of the ore found in India is of medium grade or low grade, is MOIL making any efforts to beneficiate these ores?
We are already having two beneficiation plants, one at Dungri and the other at Balaghat, our two most major mines. We also do manual jigging to beneficiate whatever we can do, but there are plans to do better beneficiation in future also. As I told you, the future lies in having better beneficiation and centering also. So we are thinking on those lines, but right now also we are having 2 large beneficiation plants which are continuously being used.
Thanks.
I think there's nobody else. We are done.
If there are no other questions, I will just kindly excuse me. I have some little emergency where, urgency rather, where I have to leave halfway and go. Thank you. Thanks.
Mr. T.N. Patnaik, before you leave, we have a memento for you. Please accept that.
Thank you, sir.
Our next speaker, Mr. Peter Finnemore. He's the Chief Marketing Officer, South 32, who almost all of us are familiar with. Peter was appointed Chief Marketing Officer in August 2017 after having been Head of Marketing for South 32 since May 2015. He has over 25 years of global experience in logistics and marketing. Prior to joining South 32, Peter held various roles in BHP Billiton, including Vice President Marketing Aluminum in The Hague, and led the consolidation of the aluminum and stainless steel materials marketing teams in August 2012. In 2013, Peter was appointed Vice President Marketing Aluminum, Manganese and nickel based out of Singapore. Previously, Peter worked in various marketing roles in Japan, Australia, Russia, Cyprus, and Switzerland, including for Rio Tinto and Rusal. His paper will be on manganese. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Ashok, for that introduction and the fact that my domestic competitor left before I spoke. I'm not going to read anything into that at all. I won't take it personally. Look, this is my first time presenting in India, the first time actually presenting on manganese versus other commodities when I've had the opportunity to present elsewhere. So I'd like first to say thank you to the organising committee for the invitation to speak. I'd like to say thanks to Manish, whose powers of persuasion convinced me to sponsor what really is a really wonderful and well-attended event. So we're actually quite grateful for the opportunity. But the real reason we're here is that because India is a very important market for us. It's a growing market for South 32. We have many valued customers and business partners here. And this week, this event provides a great opportunity for us to meet our customers, our partners, hear about the opportunities, the challenges, and how we may work together more effectively. At South 32, we get the importance of relationships and we are committed to working on them. To that end, I am joined by my colleagues. I see they've gate crashed the VIP seats. I'm not sure how we manage that. But we've got Beata, who looks after the global book for manganese ore. Melissa, I don't travel anywhere without someone from my risk team if you're in commodities. And many of you, of course, will know Sandeep, who looks after manganese in the Indian market. I'm sorry I don't have a really interesting title for my presentation. It's in fact pretty boring, so I'm going to talk about South 32. But what I intend to do is talk about South 32, provide a very brief overview. I won't spend a lot of time on that, around who we are. And then I'll touch on some aspects of doing business and how we see the evolution of the manganese industry and matters that are of fundamental importance to us. I'm not an analyst, so there's not going to be lots of graphs, and I think the market analysis has been well covered by my colleagues on the podium. I will make one comment though, and that is we might have to, as an industry, think a little bit differently about Chinese port stocks and what the new norm is. And I would suggest that's something for us to contemplate. Anyway, first to South 32. As I say, I'm not going to go through this in chapter and verse. We're a global company. We've got a reasonable sized footprint. We only started or were established less than 3.5 years ago, 3.5 years ago. We're a very young company. Just for the avoidance of doubt, because we've had this question a few times, we are not BHP. We're not owned by BHP. We're an independent company listed on the Australian Stock Exchange with secondary listings in London and Johannesburg. When we first demerged from BHP in May 2015, people questioned our longevity, whether we would survive as a company outside that umbrella. And I think part of my theme today is that South 32, we're financially sound and we're in this for the long term. Again, I don't intend to go through the results in any great level of detail. These are our most recent full year results. And again, the purpose of me showing this is not to say we've got money in the bank or things like that. It is to reinforce to the Indian industry that we are a company that is here to stay and will be around for a long time to come. Our global footprint. Manganese is really important to us, there's no question about it, but we're more than just a manganese company. We've got interests in the aluminium value chain from bauxite through to aluminium smelting. We've got ferro-nickel, met coal, energy coal, silver, lead and zinc. We've got a global footprint, both in terms of our operations. As you can see, we're in South America, we're in Southern Africa and in Australia, but also in terms of the markets in which we deal. We've got a fairly diversified market base with no particular country commanding any more than 10 to 12% of our revenue. So relatively diversified. In terms of our manganese business, I think many of you are aware we're an integrated producer. So we've got 3 manganese ore mines and 2 smelters, but we're long ore, and to be clear, that's where our strength lies, both with a strong position in the Kalahari and of course Gemco, which is a truly first-class manganese mine. One of the things I'm really good at doing is catching the chairman up time in these things to get us back on schedule. Again, many of you will be familiar with our facilities. I don't intend to go through them. We sell a range of alloy products. We also have a broad spectrum of ore grades and types. Note the figures on the slide are average or typical, if you like, in terms of our ore. But one thing that I'd like to make clear, we're always listening to the voice of the customer or the customers globally as to how we might get better and how we might better serve the customer and sensibly adapt our suite of products to the needs of the customers and the markets in which we operate. So we remain very open-minded as to the opportunity to working together. But that's enough about South 32. I want to spend a couple of minutes on a topic that is close to my heart, or close to our heart, the subject of indices. Certainly at industry conferences such as this, often the veracity or quality of indices are often, I guess, challenged or discussed. So at South 32, we strongly believe that market-based pricing, as reflected through an index or a bilateral spot negotiation, but the index is a natural evolution for any commodity in terms of market development. Now, we've seen it in LME products, which go back many decades, the aluminium or the nickel pricing. You're seeing it increasingly now in the bulk products. You've seen it emerge in iron ore. You've seen it in met coal, and we've seen it in manganese ore over the last 6 to 7 years. We firmly believe in that as a pricing mechanism. Why do we believe in it? A couple of points, and it's not exhaustive. So the fundamentals of supply and demand, which are reflected through the price, should drive the correct capital allocation decisions and also utilisation decisions, both nearby and in the long term. We fundamentally believe that is healthy for an industry to understand those price signals. We also believe that that kind of pricing mechanism allows a buyer and seller in long-term relationships to focus on other, perhaps more important drivers of value. Examples of that: supply chain efficiencies, understanding quality and VIU needs, smoother transaction flows where a lot of money can be made or lost, versus argy-bargy over a cent or two here or a dollar or two here or there. In our experience, we believe this type of pricing mechanism also reduces performance risk. If you do fixed prices over extended periods, which perhaps back in the day was a little bit more normal, it did introduce, I guess, a temptation for either party to walk away from deals as markets moved up and down. I'm sure many of you have been looking at the stats on the screen. The index or the indices as they emerge are increasingly representative of the price. But I guess if I leave one message, it's that to be effective and for indices in any commodity to work, industry participants need to stand up and take accountability. They can't stand aside and throw stones at indices. To that end, I'll share with you, I guess, our approach in relation to reporting, etc. And really important is that it requires a level of discipline from participants. It requires a robust process and governance internally to ensure that we abide by the regulations. It requires the index provider, the price reporting agency, to be able to demonstrate a robust methodology, which should be able to stand the test of time. We should be really clear when we talk about this that across industries, this has legal implications for both the individual and for the company to ensure that you abide by these rules given the regulatory environment. We take this very seriously. We are very happy to share our approach with any industry participant in any industry for that matter, in terms of how we think about the index and how we set up our internal processes to ensure that it is representative and appropriate. So in closing, I told you I'd be reasonably quick. We believe in transparent market-based pricing. We believe it's fundamentally good for the industry. It makes that industry stronger, and ultimately that should be good for all of us. Particularly for India, as it continues its outstanding growth in both steel and the ferro alloy sectors, we're really looking forward to the opportunities that emerge here. As South32, we want to continue to work with the ferro alloy industry in India to ensure a successful long-term future for all of us. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Peter. With Indian ferroalloy industry importing increasing quantities of manganese ore, with South32 is emerging as a very important partner for the industry, and this talk of his about their practices and the transparency is important to all of us. I would now like to open the panel up to questions, starting with the first speaker, Mr. Alois, on the global dynamics of demand and supply of manganese ore and alloys. Any questions for him, please? Or any questions for the other speakers? Probably some have forgotten the papers. Yeah. Well, if there are no more questions, I would like to conclude by thanking our presenters for providing us with a very provocative set of papers. And I would like to thank all of you for coming and being so attentive. Thank you all.
Thank you for this informative session, all of you. And I would now request Mr. Ashok to present the mementos to all our speakers as a token of appreciation for taking your time out and sharing your views with us.
Pleasure.
We have the mementos there. I would like to request Mr. Manish Sarda to please come upon stage and present the memento to Mr. Ashok. Thank you all. So our speakers and our chairs have made this really interesting session, and after this I think we should all go out and get refreshed. So we have a tea break for all of you for 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, please come back. We have another session, and this session is on chrome, alloys and ore. So see you all here in 15 minutes.